Hey, did you know that over 90% of our viewers watch our videos but haven't subscribed yet? If you enjoy these true trucker horror stories, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It's free and really motivates us to keep the stories rolling. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's stories. The night presses close against the open road, carrying a silence that feels almost alive. Welcome to the sleep haunt, where truth lingers in the shadows and fear rides quietly at your side. Tonight, we bring you 7 true, most haunting trucker horror stories. Encounters born from deserted highways, dim rest stops, and long stretches of darkness, where something unseen kept pace with the wheels. Before we begin, we've set a goal. Let's reach 100 likes on this video. Tap that like button now and help us keep rolling deeper into the dark. And share your city and the time you're listening in the comments. Let's see who's awake with us on the night road. Now, settle in, breathe slow, and listen. The road remembers everything. Story number 1. The night run from Amarillo to Albuquerque had always felt straightforward to Ethan. A long ribbon of highway, a handful of sleepy towns, and the occasional glow of a gas station cutting through the dark. He had driven it so many times over the years that he could picture the route with his eyes closed. The distant wind turbines, the farmhouses standing alone in seas of grass, the flicker of neon motel signs in forgotten exits. That was why the mile marker stood out so clearly. Mile 313. He first noticed it around 1:40 inches the morning. The sky above was a deep, starless navy, the kind of darkness that rides in ahead of a storm. His truck's high beams cut a white tunnel through the night. The radio murmured low, some late-night talk host chattering about safe following distances, like a reminder to breathe steady. The green sign appeared on the right shoulder, lit up by his beams. White numbers, 313. He barely registered it. He had passed hundreds of signs like it before. Just another count on the way to the next city. 10 minutes later, he saw it again. Mile 313. The exact same skewed angle of the post in the dirt. The same scuffed lower corner where road salt had eaten into the paint. The same little bent patch of metal at the top, like someone had tried to twist it once and given up. That pulled his mind fully awake. He checked his mirrors, then the digital readout on his dash. His speed had been a steady 68 the whole time. No exits, no turns. The road had been a straight line for miles. He hadn't fallen asleep. He hadn't doubled back. But there it was. Mile 313 again. The air in the cab felt a little tighter. He turned the radio up a notch, just enough for the voice to sit clearly in the background. Maybe it was a duplicate sign. It happened, he told himself. 2 maintenance crews. A simple mistake. Logically, it made sense. Still, when the minutes let themselves slide forward and the hum of the tires smoothed into that low, droning sound that matched his pulse, he kept checking the right shoulder more often than before. Mile 313 appeared for a third time. There was no mistaking it now. He recognized every tiny imperfection. The post leaned just a fraction toward the road, a thin spray of mud frozen up one side where a truck must have fishtailed months ago. All of it was identical. The clock on the dash ticked over another minute. Outside, nothing changed. Dark fields, empty sky. A faint line of old fenk, posts far back in the dark. The second-hand tips of fear began to crawl up the back of his neck. Nothing dramatic. Just an awareness that something on this familiar road had slipped out of place. Like a picture moved half an inch on a wall. Tiny, but impossible to ignore. Ethan reached for the CB, thumb grazing the cracked plastic. The channel was quiet. Just a soft hiss of static. It was late enough that most other drivers along that stretch were either miles ahead or behind, or dozing at truck stops with their engines idling low. Anyone else out on 40 westbound near Amarillo? He considered saying. His thumb hovered, then fell back. It would sound strange. Hi. Is anyone else passing the same mile marker over and over? It didn't quite come out right in his head. Better to watch a little longer. There would be a logical explanation. The wind picked up outside, shaking the side of the trailer with a hollow shudder. The first smudges of rain appeared on the windshield, catching and smearing in the wiper blade's path. As the storm grew, the world outside his windows shrank. Beyond the white sweep of his lights was only a moving wall of water. He checked the clock. Another 10 minutes had passed. Up ahead, something reflective caught the beams. A green square on the right shoulder. He gripped the wheel a little tighter, jaw setting before he could stop it. The sign slid into focus. Mile 313. For a moment, the truck seemed strangely quiet inside, even with the rain and the engine. It felt like the space around Ethan had contracted, pressing in from all directions. His scalp prickled. He spoke out loud, just to hear his own voice and push back whatever quiet had crept in. That's not right. Rain hammered harder. His wipers beat a faster rhythm. The long road in front of the truck became a constant tunnel of slanting water and white light. He flicked the high beams on and off, as if that would change something. The GPS screen on his dash still showed a straight line west. The little blue arrow moved along as expected. The distance to Albuquerque ticked down. According to the satellite view, he was covering new ground, but the world outside refused to agree. He reached forward and zoomed in on the digital map. The mile markers displayed 311, 312, 313, 314. Neat little icons along the virtual freeway. The blue arrow glided past 311. It passed 312. It reached 313, the icon highlighting for a blink as he went by. The digital arrow did not move backward. It continued on, creeping toward mile 314. Outside, another mile 313 sign flashed in the lights. Static fluttered on the CB, a tiny shiver of sound that broke the cab's tense silence. The speaker crackled once, then again. Ethan's hand snapped out and turned the volume up. At first, there was only noise, soft, uneven, like someone breathing too close to the microphone. Then a shape emerged in the hiss. A thin voice tangled deep in the static. Anybody, westbound. It faded, then strengthened again, warped and distant. Westbound near 313. You seeing this? Ethan didn't realize he was holding his breath until his chest began to ache. He lifted the mic, thumb pressing down almost a little too hard. Westbound 40, yeah. Just past 313, and then past it again. And again. His own voice sounded slightly different, flatter, as if the enclosed space was swallowing some part of it. The static hissed. Then came a reply, thin, almost swallowed by the noise. Not just me. The CB squealed with a quick, high spike of feedback that made him flinch. When it settled, the channel went empty. No more breathing sounds. Nothing but open-air static. He tried again, calling out, asking for the other driver's handle, what they were hauling, how far back they were. His questions disappeared into the noise. The other voice did not come back. The clock on the dash rolled forward. Rain blurred the outside world into gray streaks. Somewhere up ahead, across the windshield's roaring curtain, another sign materialized. Mile 313. Ethan slowed. Not enough to be dangerous, just enough to feel it. The cruise control clicked off with a soft sound. The truck's engine lowered its pitch. 65, 62, 58. At 45 miles an hour, the world seemed oddly quieter, like the storm had shifted. The sign passed by in slow motion. This time, he craned forward and peered out to the side as he went by. The post of the sign bore scratches at knee height, pale lines against the dark metal, undoable to see at higher speed. They looked old, shallow, but deliberate, like someone had knelt there and dragged something sharp across it again and again. The hair on his arms lifted. He pressed the accelerator back down, wanting speed again, wanting to leave that sign firmly behind. The truck responded, rumbling forward. The rain thinned slightly. The wipers squeaked once as they ran over glass that was more dry than wet. Mud-scented air seeped through some tiny gap in the seals around the door. It smelled like fields after heavy weather, like standing water and disturbed soil. Minutes passed. The GPS continued to insist he was heading steadily toward mile 320 and beyond. The digital arrow did not falter or loop, but the next reflective green rectangle waiting up ahead had the familiar numbers. Mile 313. The fifth time, something had changed. The sign was the same, but now, in the grassy ditch beyond it, a shape stood motionless. A figure, far enough away that the rain and darkness blurred the details, but close enough that Ethan knew it was a person. They stood facing his direction, on the far side of the shallow ditch, just past the sign. No vehicle near them, no luggage, no light. As the truck rolled nearer, the figure did not move. 100 yards away, Ethan's foot hesitated over the accelerator, pressure fading without his permission. 60. 55. 50. He did not hit the brake. He did not intend to slow. The truck simply lost speed, as though the slight grade of the road had changed. The figure remained where it was, arms down at its sides. It wore something dark, long enough to blur into a shapeless silhouette. The face was impossible to make out, turned toward the road but swallowed by distance. Instinct tugged at one corner of his mind. Someone out there in the rain and dark might need help. His hand slid an inch toward the signal lever, as though to pull over. Then another, older instinct coiled underneath it, heavy and quiet. Something in the unnatural repetition of that mile marker, in the duplicated scratches on the post, in the never-ending approach of the same stretch of road, whispered a warning. The truck drew even with the sign. In the edge of his peripheral vision, the figure finally moved. Not toward the truck, not away. It simply turned. It rotated smoothly, like a compass needle finding north, until its body faced the same direction Ethan was heading. Its back to him now, as if, without looking, it somehow knew exactly where the truck was along that road. Ethan's skin crawled. Without conscious thought, he pressed the accelerator back down, urging the engine toward its normal cruising speed. In the side mirror, for a brief moment before distance and rain swallowed the scene, the figure could be seen once more. Still standing, still facing down the direction of the road, as though waiting. The CB crackled again. This time there was no faint breathing, no hint of another driver. Just a flat, distant whisper that did not quite sound like it came through a speaker at all. "Don't stop at 313. The words were clear. They came in the same tone someone might use when reminding another person not to miss an important exit. Calm, direct, almost conversational. The channel went dead. Ethan's thumb jabbed the mic switch. "Who is that? What is this? Where is the next exit?" The questions came out sharper than he'd intended. The last one was the most important. He needed an off-ramp, a rest area, anything that broke the flow of this impossible stretch of road. Silence answered him. The CB gave no flicker of life. His fingers tightened around the wheel until the joints in his hands ached. He stared into the rain, searching for the glow of approaching taillights, the sign for a rest stop, anything that signaled a normal interruption in this repeating pattern. Instead, a familiar green rectangle grew out of the storm ahead. Mile 313. This time, the figure was closer to the shoulder. No ditch between them. Only the narrow strip of gravel that separated hard pavement from swaying grass. It stood perhaps 15 feet back from the sign, motionless, arms still at its sides. "Don't stop at 313. Whoever had spoken sounded calm, rational, as if sharing a rule they had learned the hard way. Ethan fixed his eyes on the center of his lane. The truck rolled forward, 45 miles an hour, 38. His foot pressed down, but now it felt like forcing through thick mud. The sensation was subtle but unmistakable. As the truck slowed, his pulse climbed, each beat loud in his ears. The figure by the sign seemed taller this time, or perhaps the shorter distance made it easier to see. The dark clothing clung to its outline, suggesting a long coat or something like it. The face was still a blur in the rain, but the angle of the head was unmistakable. It was watching the truck. Something rippled at the very edge of his vision, a slight sideways motion, as though another shape had stepped out from behind the first. For a heartbeat, there was the impression of two silhouettes side by side, aligned so closely they almost overlapped. Ethan's stomach clenched. He found the horn with one hand and hit it, a short, sharp burst that cut through the storm. The noise seemed to flatten against the inside of the cab rather than go out into the night. The speedometer dipped to 30. Outside, the figure took a single, smooth step forward toward the shoulder. The truck's engine roared in response to Ethan's desperate pressure on the pedal. The cab trembled with the strain. Slowly, painfully, the needle inched back upward. 32, 35, 40. The figure stopped. Its head tilted, just a fraction, as if considering something. At this distance, for the barest instant, The shape of its face seemed almost visible. A suggestion of eyes that were open too wide, a mouth that didn't quite sit in the right place. Then the storm thickened again, rain dragging a new curtain across the windshield, and the sign was behind him. The CB stayed silent. A different sound replaced it. The steady, familiar buzz of the truck's own radio, the one that played music and overnight chatter from distant stations. He had turned it low earlier, but now, without him touching the dial, the volume crept upward, notch by notch. Voices from some late-night program slipped back into the cab, mid-conversation. "You ever have that feeling," a talk host was saying, "where you drive a road you know well and realize something small is wrong, but you can't name it?" A caller laughed faintly, replying, "Yeah, like déjà vu that isn't exactly déjà vu." Ethan's hand shot out and twisted the knob, cutting them off. The silence that followed felt somehow safer. The GPS continued to assert that he was moving forward, each imaginary mile passing as it should. The distance to his destination had dropped significantly since the storm began. If the digital numbers were right, he should have been well past the mile in question. But the road outside did not agree. Another sign grew out of the dark ahead, glowing pale green in the headlights. Mile 313. The figure was gone. The ditch was empty. The strip of shoulder gravel lay undisturbed. The scratches on the post were still there, now so familiar they almost felt like an old landmark. Only the absence of the watchful silhouette made the air feel wrong in a new way. Some tension in Ethan's chest loosened, but not by much. He began counting seconds under his breath, using the rhythm to anchor himself in the moment, to remind himself that time was still moving forward. 60 seconds after passing the sign. 90. 3 minutes. 5. The road did not change. The fields on either side remained open and unreadable in the darkness. But he realized, slowly, that the engine note had shifted. It sounded fractionally different, as though the truck had shrugged off some unseen drag. The GPS chimed softly. Up ahead on the digital map, an icon flashed. Exit 317. Rest area 2 miles. There it was. Proof that the world beyond this endless mile marker still existed. Relief rose in a slow wave, cautious but very real. 2 actual miles. A rest stop meant lights, concrete, probable vending machines, maybe another driver or two. Company, even if distant. The next few minutes were the longest of the night. Sign after sign on the digital map appeared in order. 314, 315, 316. The physical mile markers outside the window, however, did not match. No fresh numbers, only open road and darkness, and the occasional cluster of reflective posts. Then, unexpectedly, the lights appeared. They rose out of the black like a faint glow at first, then brightened. Tall lamp posts. The familiar blue sign for an upcoming rest area. The outline of parked trucks in a large paved lot just beyond the curve. Ethan exhaled, shoulders sagging a fraction. The exit 317 sign appeared on the right shoulder, exactly where the GPS had promised it would be. It looked almost impossibly normal, its white lettering steady and reassuring. He put on his turn signal. The clicking filled the cab, sounding more mechanical and regular than anything had all night. The truck eased onto the ramp, climbing a gentle grade, leaving the repeating mile behind. At the top of the ramp, the rest area opened up before him in concrete and sodium light. A handful of rigs were already parked, their cabs dark, engines idling softly. A vending machine glow shone from the center building. Ethan pulled into a space at the far end of the lot, facing away from the highway. The moment he shifted the truck into park, a deep quiet settled around him, different from the rolling hush of the road. The storm, while still present, seemed to hang higher now, its sound more distant. He sat there for a long moment, hands still on the wheel, listening. The CB offered only a soft, untroubled hiss. The engine ticked as it cooled. Somewhere outside, a distant door thudded shut. He forced himself to move, to go through the motions he always followed at rest stops. He logged the time in his book, checked a few readings, made sure everything on the truck looked the way it should. At last, he stepped down from the cab. The night air was cool and smelled of wet pavement and coffee drifting from another truck's open window. The rain had thinned to a mist. Overhead, a few stars had finally broken through the clouds. From where he stood, the highway below was just a ribbon of light moving past headlights and taillights, flowing like a silent river. No sign from this vantage point of the lonely mile that had been repeating. No figure standing watch at its edge. Inside the rest area building, bright fluorescent lights hummed. A pair of vending machines buzzed in one corner. A tired-looking man in a reflective vest sipped from a foam cup at a table, eyes half closed. Ethan bought a bottled drink just to have something to hold, and wandered to the far wall where a large laminated map of the state was pinned up under glass. Tiny lights marked major cities. Colored lines traced highways. He found the road he had just traveled. The marker for mile 313 was there, small and unremarkable. To its west, the line continued neatly, passing 314, 315, 316, 317, with no gaps. A young woman in a janitor's uniform passed behind him, pushing a cart of supplies. She glanced up at the map, then at him. "Long night?" she asked quietly, more out of courtesy than curiosity. He considered how to answer. The image of the figure by the mile marker sat sharp in his mind, refusing to blur into something that could be brushed aside. "Something like that," he said. She nodded, not pressing. "Storms make these stretches weird. People say they see all kinds of things between Amarillo and here." He hesitated, then asked, "Ever hear anyone mention mile 313? The woman paused, hand resting lightly on the handle of the cart. Her expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. "Why that one?" she asked. He watched her carefully. "Think I passed it more times than I should have." She studied his face for a moment, then let out a slow breath. "Some drivers talk about that spot," she admitted. "Staff aren't supposed to encourage stories, but they say if you start seeing the same marker too often out there, you don't stop until you see the exit sign for this place. No matter what you think you see on the side of the road." The back of his neck prickled. "Do they say why?" he asked. She shook her head. "No one agrees. Some say maybe there was an accident there years ago that never sat right. Others say the road's graded funny, and it plays tricks on people in storms. Doesn't really matter, does it? Rule's the same." Her words lined up neatly with the faint whisper that had crawled through his CB. "Don't stop at 313. You get many people coming and talking about it?" He pressed gently. "Not often." She started to push the cart again, then paused to add, "But when they do, they usually don't want to stay parked here very long. Just enough to breathe. Then they're back on the road." He glanced back out the window where his truck waited. Beyond it, the highway's moving lights glimmered like steady, indifferent stars. "Is there a camera on that stretch?" he asked suddenly, surprising himself. "Traffic cam or something? Footage?" She gave a short, almost apologetic laugh. "Out there? Closest thing you're looking at is this map, and it's been the same for years." He thanked her and stepped back into the cool night. The rest area seemed solid, concrete under his boots, fluorescent bulbs humming overhead. Yet some part of his mind remained out on that repeating mile, watching a dark figure by a scratched signpost. Back in his cab, he checked the GPS again. The map showed only what it always did. A clear route onward. No loops, no anomalies. He checked his logbook. The time spent between the storm's beginning and his arrival at the rest area matched the distance traveled, more or less. Nothing out of line. He started the engine. It rumbled awake, familiar and reassuring. He pulled out of the space, circled the lot, and eased back down the ramp toward the highway. The merge lane opened ahead. As he joined the flow of traffic, he glanced once at the green markers along the shoulder. Mile 318, then 319. The rest of the night's run passed without incident. The storm moved on. The stars brightened. The road returned to the version of itself that thousands of drivers knew and trusted. By morning, Ethan could almost have convinced himself that exhaustion and rain had played tricks on his senses, that the voice on the CB was just stray interference, that the figure by the sign had been nothing more than a shadow and a stretch of imagination. Almost. Weeks later, sitting in a diner in another town, he overheard two drivers at the next booth talking in lowered voices about strange stretches of road. They traded stories about phantom lights and odd exits that didn't appear where they should. Neither of them sounded like they truly believed what they were saying. Their words were coated in humor, pushed along with shrugs. Then one of them leaned close and said, a little more quietly, "You know about 313 west of Amarillo?" The other driver went still, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. "Yeah," he murmured. "Rule is don't stop there." Neither of them could say exactly why. Only that once the signs begin repeating, once that strange familiarity settles heavy over the cab, once a human-shaped shadow appears where no one should be standing, the road has its own quiet rules. Rules that drivers learn to follow, even without understanding. And for anyone passing that way on some future stormy night, tired eyes fixed on an endless line of pavement, the same mile marker will stand waiting in the rain, scratched post leaning toward the road, as if listening. If that mile begins to appear too often, and a dark, watching figure rises out of the grass beyond it, the safest choice is simple. Do not stop at mile 313. Story number 2. Lena had always liked the late runs. Out past midnight, the interstate grew quiet and honest. No commuter rush, no impatient horns, just the low ribbon of asphalt, the steady drone of the engine, and the occasional constellation of sodium lights gathered around a rest stop or town. She knew this stretch of highway through the Midwest by heart-flat fields, isolated farmhouses, long distances where nothing changed. On the maps, the road seemed simple. Straight line, dotted with exits, and the small square marker of a closed way station she hadn't had to worry about in over a year. The closure had been the talk of drivers for weeks when it happened. Budget cuts, some had said. Too many near misses on that ramp, others replied. Lena remembered the last time she'd rolled past it in daylight. Barricades across the entrance, orange barrels, a faded sign wrapped in yellow tape. Now, sometime after 2 in the morning, that old way station existed only as a memory, something her eyes skimmed past in the dark without needing to see. A thin fog clung low over the fields, spreading in soft sheets across low spots in the road. Her headlights cut tunnels through it. Bright cones of light swallowed at the edges by gray. The radio murmured under her fingers, some local station fading in and out between songs. The CB was quiet. Up ahead, the black sky glowed faintly orange where a cluster of highway lights rose. As she drew closer, the source of that glow came into focus. One of those overhead message boards, rectangular and imposing, straddling the lanes. Usually they warned of construction or speed changes. Tonight, lines of amber letters scrolled across it, clear in the dark. All trucks. Next. Right. Scale open. Lena frowned. She checked the dash clock. 2:18 a.m. She glanced at the GPS mounted to her right. According to the map, the closed way station lay just a mile ahead, the little gray icon with a line through it indicating permanently shut. The sign above the highway glowed insistently. Trucks. Must exit. She glanced around. 2 sets of headlights followed her in the distance, and a single rig ahead of her had already flipped on its turn signal, drifting into the right lane. Maybe they'd reopened it. Things changed. Nobody updated the CB chatter all that often, and she'd been running southern routes for months. A surprise reopening wasn't impossible. Still, unease pricked at her. As she approached the exit ramp, another sign stood at its start, smaller but just as firm. Way station. Open. All trucks. The truck ahead of her took it. Lena hesitated for a fraction of a second, then signaled and followed. She told herself it was the responsible thing to do. Better a little delay than a ticket for ignoring a posted order. The ramp curved away from the interstate, sloping down, then back up through fog that thickened as she left the main road. Gravel crackled under her tires where the asphalt narrowed. The red taillights of the truck ahead disappeared into the whiteness like swallowed embers. She eased back on the accelerator. The air outside looked like it had weight. A cluster of lights bloomed ahead, hazy at first, then sharper. The way station appeared in pieces out of the fog. A short brick building, a row of tall lamps over a wide concrete pad. The long, narrow shadow of the scale itself painted darker in the wet. It didn't look like the one she remembered. The old station, the one she'd last seen months before closure, had been a squat prefab structure, all metal siding and cheap glass. This building had a different shape, solid brick, an older style with a flat roof and aluminum-framed windows. The sign over the lane read, State Transport Inspection in bold, weathered letters, the state seal beside it printed in a design Lena hadn't seen in years. There were no other trucks. The pad, the approach lanes, the parking area to the side, everything was empty. No idling engines, no flash of brake lights, no silhouettes of cabs resting between runs. Lena glanced at her mirrors. The fog had folded in behind her, swallowing the ramp. The two sets of headlights she'd seen on the main line earlier did not appear. The highway itself, visible only as a faint smear of distant glow beyond the thin trees, might as well have been miles away. Her tires rolled onto the scale. She braked gently at the painted line. A red signal light glowed above the lane. The indicator box to her left, the one that usually displayed weight, flickered to life. Its screen was not the neat green LED she was used to. Instead, dim orange digits stuttered, and then settled. Gross, 78,540. That was about right for her load. At least that part worked. A speaker crackled in a metal box under the signal light. "Driver in the blue Freightliner," a man's voice said, calm and level. "Engine off, parking brake set." Lena complied automatically, surprised by the sudden presence of another human being. The voice sounded close, but she saw no attendant in the windowed booth beside the lane. Fluorescent lights glowed inside, illuminating paper-stacked desks and a wall of framed certificates, but no figure moved within. She switched the engine off. The cab settled into a different kind of quiet. Outside, beyond her glass, the night seemed to press closer. "Company name?" the voice asked through the speaker. She leaned toward her open window. "Northern Cross Logistics." A faint rustle answered, like a page turning near a microphone. "Origin, Chicago. Destination, Raleigh. Bill of lading number." She read it off from the clipboard on her passenger seat, the numbers feeling strangely louder than they should in the confined cab. More rustling. "Number of souls on board." The question slid into the routine sequence with almost no pause. Lena blinked. "Say again?" Silence for half a heartbeat. Then, in exactly the same tone as before, "Number of souls on board, driver." She glanced instinctively into the sleeper behind her. Bunk neatly made, duffel strapped in place, curtain slightly open. No one. Just as there had been for every mile of this run. "Just me," she said slowly. "Solo." The speaker crackled. "Copy. 1. The red light over the lane stayed on. Usually by now green would flash or she'd be told to pull around for a walk around. Instead, the voice came again, a slight edge to it now. "Confirm. You did not stop between mile 142 and mile 159. Lena frowned. "Didn't even see a place to." "Straight shot. Confirm you did not pick up any riders near cross-state line marker." "I don't pick up hitchers," she said. "Company policy. And mine." Another shuffle of paper. It sounded odd, like it echoed inside something larger than the small speaker box. "Manifest indicates unscheduled door open at mile 151. The tone was still calm, but there was something under it now. "Can you account for that, driver?" She stared at the shadowed building. "My doors have been sealed since the warehouse. You can check if you want, but there hasn't been any." "Stay in the vehicle," the voice cut in, not unkind, but firm. "We see more than you think up on this pad." Lena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Her trailer doors were indeed sealed. She'd checked them herself at her last fuel stop. There'd been no jolts suggestive of tampering, no alarms on the dash. "I don't understand what you're saying," she replied. "Maybe your system's pulling old data. I've been running clean." Silence answered her. The red light glowed. Inside the building, one of the monitors mounted on the far wall flickered. It faced the lane at an angle, its glass catching some of the overhead light. On it, black and white footage looped. A truck rolled into view on the grainy screen, seen from above a familiar shape, same model as hers, same company logo stark white against its darker paint. In the washed-out playback, its trailer doors appeared to be slightly ajar, darkness visible between them like a thin wedge. The view cut. The same truck again, parked on the shoulder of a deserted stretch of highway. No traffic around, no sign of driver or passenger. Then another cut. The interior of a cab from some high angle. Camera perhaps mounted near the ceiling. A woman alone at the wheel. Dark braid. Familiar shoulders. Hands resting just where Lena's now lay. She went cold. The footage flickered, and the woman in the cab on the screen turned her head. as if hearing something behind her. Her mouth moved, forming words Lena couldn't hear. Then the image stuttered, blurred, and cut back to the overhead shot of the scale lane. "Sometimes it opens without you knowing," the voice from the speaker said, softer now. "Sometimes it doesn't. That's what we check here." Lena swallowed against a dry throat. "What is this station?" she asked. "Did they rebuild it?" The red light above the lane began to pulse, slow, steady, matching some unseen heartbeat. "This facility intercepts deviations," the man's voice replied, almost reciting. "Things that stepped in where they weren't meant to. Things that climb up when somebody pulls off where they shouldn't." Lena's mind jumped, unbidden, to old fragments of stories told at truck stop counters. Warnings half-laughed about never stopping on certain overpasses, about people who pulled into unmarked rest areas that didn't exist in daylight. "I didn't stop," she said again, quietly this time. A light blinked on inside the building, above a doorway she hadn't noticed before. It cast a pale slice across the floor, glinting off the metal trim like a guiding line. "Step inside, driver," the voice said. "Bring your logbook." Everything in her resisted. The hairs at the back of her neck had lifted, and some low instinct urged her to turn the key, throw the truck into gear, roll right off the scale and back toward the open road. But the engine was off. The red light above the lane burned. The fog held close on every side. She took her logbook from the dash, opened her door, and climbed down onto the damp concrete. The air smelled different off the highway, less of exhaust, more of wet cement and stale paper. A faint hum came from the building, the kind industrial lights make when they've been burning too long. Her boots echoed as she crossed the painted lines and stepped through the glass door marked entry. Inside, the lobby was cooler, the light a harsh, buzzing white. Plastic chairs lined one wall. A counter with a computer and a phone sat opposite. Forms in metal racks labeled vehicle inspection and hazmat declaration waited untouched. Dust lay along the tops of the racks in a thin film. No one stood behind the counter. The voice came not from a person but from a grill in the ceiling. "Place the logbook on the scale," it said. A smaller platform scale sat beside the counter, clearly meant for packages. Lena set her log on it. The digital readout blinked. 0.6 pounds. "Pages 31 to 34, the ceiling speaker said. "Those runs 3 months ago, southbound through Ross County. You stopped on the overpass in the snow." "I never did," Lena said, but her hands were already flipping through the book. Pages 31 to 34 were blank. Not spare, waiting for future blank. Not misnumbered. Just empty. Date fields unfilled. Route lines missing. A void stamp should have gone over them. If she'd skipped those days. It hadn't. Gooseflesh crept up her arms. "I was on dedicated local runs then," she said, more to herself than the unseeable voice. "Never even came through this state." "The log doesn't agree," the speaker replied. "Something else wrote in that time. Something the paper won't hold." Lena lifted her eyes slowly to the wall behind the counter. Between the required posters about labor laws and brake inspection procedures hung something older. A framed black and white photograph, its glass slightly clouded, displayed a scene Lena recognized immediately despite its age. This very way station. Same low brick building. Same angled view of the approach lane. But in the photograph, the building's roof sagged, and one corner was collapsed. Bricks scattered, as if something had hit it hard. Scorched marks darkened the walls. In front of the ruined building, several trucks sat at rest. Their cabs were of models Lena rarely saw anymore, boxy and old. Company logos belonging to carriers long since merged or gone under. A small plaque below the photograph read, "Station 23, Incident Prevention Program, inaugurated 2001. Her gaze drifted to the right, to a bulletin board pinned with layers of paper. Near the top, in neat handwriting, someone had written, "Incidents prevented since activation," followed by a number, revised and overwritten so many times the paper was thin. 328. Below that, on separate index cards, were notes. Most were brief. Unauthorized rider removed. Cab deviation corrected. Door event neutralized. On the one at the bottom, newly pinned, her own license plate number stared back at her, ink still dark and fresh. Next to it, in tight block letters, someone had written, Unconfirmed door event. Driver cooperative. The speaker hummed softly overhead. You didn't let it in, the voice said. Not fully. That's good. Some do, and they don't come past here. You can go. Lena turned slowly toward the door. Who are you? She asked. A pause. Think of us as the place between, the voice answered. Between the mile you shouldn't have stopped on, and the miles you still have left. Between the things that stand by the guardrails at night and the people who keep going. Her heart thudded in her chest. I didn't stop, she said again because she needed to. Keep it that way, the voice replied. When you see the signs again, ignore them. Drive straight. You'll be fine. The lobby light over the door flickered, then steadied. Outside, through the glass, Lena could see. Her truck still waiting on the pad, red marker lights glowing dim in the fog. She backed out of the building, logbook in hand, the hum of the fluorescent lights fading behind her. The air on the pad felt warmer somehow, and she took a deep breath that tasted like wet asphalt and cold metal. Climbing back into her cab, she paused with one hand on the wheel, listening. The speaker by the lane crackled. You are clear, the voice said. Proceed to main line. Do not re-enter until exit 209. No stops, no side roads. You understand? I understand, Lena replied. The red light overhead clicked off. Green replaced it, bright and almost startling. Her hand shook slightly as she turned the key. The engine roared back to life, vibrations filling the floor under her boots, settling her. She rolled off the scale. The fog parted slowly as she followed the exit lane back toward the interstate. In her mirror, the way station's lights glowed behind her, then blurred, then thinned. By the time she merged onto the highway, the sky to the east carried the faintest hint of paling gray. The overhead message board she passed a mile later was blank, its dark rectangle silent above the lanes. A few hours on, at a truck stop bathed in morning light, she sat with a steaming cup of coffee while a couple of older drivers traded stories 2 stools down. When they mentioned the closed scale near mile 167, she listened. That place? One of them snorted. Been gone for years. They knocked the whole thing down after that pileup. Just bare concrete and weeds now. Lena turned her cup slowly in her hands. You sure? She asked quietly. No temporary setup? No portable station? The driver shook his head. Not on that stretch. Too much history. They don't like talking about it up at the state offices. She didn't argue. Later, alone in her cab, she flipped to pages 31 to 34 of her log again, blank, just as they'd been in the station lobby. She pressed the ballpoint pen to one of the empty date fields. For a brief, strange second, the tip hesitated on the paper, as if pressed against something harder than pulp. Then it sank through, and blue ink flowed, filling in a date from months back that her memory could not quite match to any real day. She closed the book. On her next run past that mile marker, weeks later on another night, she watched the horizon carefully. No glowing message board insisted that all trucks exit. No signs claimed the scale was open. At the place where the ramp should have been, where she remembered fog and brick and pulsing red lights, there was only a gap in the guardrail and a line of concrete barriers. Tall grass grew up between cracks in the abandoned approach lane. Her GPS showed nothing special at that point. Just an empty symbol where a way station had once been. Far down the line on the map, at exit 209, a small rest area icon waited. She drove on, keeping her eyes away from the dark shapes of overpasses and the shoulders of quiet, rural exits, where thin, patient shadows sometimes seemed to stand and watch. She never again saw a sign ordering her off for an inspection that did not appear on any map. But sometimes, late at night, when fog rolled low over the highway and the world narrowed to the reach of her headlights, she would glance at the side mirrors and imagine, just for a moment, a low-lit brick building far behind her, surrounded by a ring of quiet trucks. And inside, somewhere overhead, a calm voice counting souls, making sure the things that waited on the shoulders stayed where they belonged. Story number 3. Marco liked the desert best when it belonged to almost no one. Out there between El Paso and Phoenix, past midnight, the world narrowed to his headlights and the pale ribbon of highway gliding under his cab. The stars felt closer over the open land. The air, even in the hottest months, cooled and turned thin, slipping in around the edges of the window seals with a dry, whispering sound. He'd been running that stretch for years, He could list the exits from memory, knew which gas stations stayed open past 10, which rest areas were safe, which shoulders to avoid when dust storms swept across the lanes. The road changed a little every year, new overpasses, resurfaced sections, but one constant had always anchored the route in his mind. Red Mesa Plaza, at exit 212. It wasn't much to look at from a distance. A cluster of low buildings lit in tired neon. A couple of pumps under an old-fashioned canopy, and a diner with a big picture window facing the lot. But its coffee was always hot, the food simple and decent, and the couple who ran the place, Ray and June, treated every driver who came through like they'd been there yesterday, even when it had been months. Most nights he'd roll in around 3 in the morning, the place quiet, a few trucks dozing line abreast along the edge of the gravel. He'd sit at the corner stool, drink coffee so strong it could almost stand up on its own, and listen to June hum along with whatever slow song the radio found. On the night everything went wrong, he was running late. A delay at the warehouse, then a stretch of construction east of Las Cruces, where traffic crawled single file past machinery and cones. By the time he cleared the last cluster of orange, the sky was a black bowl overhead and the dash clock read 2:37 a.m. Red Mesa was still a good hour away. The desert lay empty on both sides, broken only by the occasional pale wash where rain had once gnawed at the land and never quite put it back. His headlights picked out scrub and rock, the faint lines of old fence posts. The CB was mostly quiet. A few out-of-range voices came and went like half-remembered dreams. His eyelids felt heavy. He cranked the window down a notch. The air that punched in was cool and dry, smelling faintly of dust and creosote. It helped, a little. He flexed his fingers on the wheel, forced himself to sit up straighter. On the horizon, a soft cluster of lights glowed too faint and too low for a city. Probably one of the tiny service towns that dotted the interstate here and there. Or, if he was close enough, maybe the halo from Red Mesa's sodium lamps. The GPS on his dash showed a simple, straight line west. Distance to exit 212, 48 miles. He focused on that number, letting it tick down like a promise. Coffee. A real seat. 30 minutes with his elbows on Formica instead of his steering wheel. He could make it. Around mile 190, the first sign of change appeared. Orange barrels lined the shoulder, their reflective stripes winking in his beams. A temporary sign loomed on the right. Roadwork ahead. Right lane closed. 10 miles. Farther along, another. Expect delays. Then, unexpectedly, a third one. Bright and fresh looking against the night. Detour. Exit 205. All traffic to Phoenix. Follow frontage road. 7 miles. Marco frowned. That hadn't been there last week. The GPS gave no indication of a detour, cheerfully insisting he continue straight. But he trusted the standing signs more than his gadget, especially out here where updates could lag behind the paint on the pavement. A mile later, another sign repeated the message, this time adding, "Through traffic only." Next exit. 212 closed. His stomach sank. Closed? They couldn't have shut the Red Mesa exit without him hearing about it. But stranger things had happened to small places along the interstate. Business dropped. Owners moved on. The state closed an off-ramp quietly and let the desert reclaim the rest. He didn't want to believe it. At exit 205, a line of reflective arrows guided vehicles off to the right. The truck ahead of him signaled and followed them. Marco sighed, flicked his own blinker on, and eased down the ramp. The frontage road ran roughly parallel to the interstate, a darker ribbon a little lower in the land. It was older asphalt, patched in squares here and there. The stripes faded. His headlights found the edge of a rusting guardrail, the pale trunks of a few scrubby trees, and beyond that, darkness. Signs continued along the roadside, their faces catching his beams as they came. Detour to Phoenix. Stay en route. Next services 212. Then, a little farther on, a tall billboard emerged from the night on the right shoulder, its paint cracked but its message loud. Red Mesa Plaza. Exit 212. Open 24 hours. Best coffee on I-40. Even in the dark, he recognized the cartoonish Red Mesa illustration and the slightly crooked lettering. He'd stared at that same sign on countless nights, using it as a marker that he was almost there. He exhaled, tension loosening a notch. Maybe the highway exit was closed. but the plaza was still reachable from the frontage road. Made sense. Locals would need a way in. The billboard passed by his window, its metal frame groaning softly in the wind. At the bottom edge, a smaller strip of text caught his eye at the last second. Last fuel divided by food 120 miles. That part was new. He caught his own reflection in the side window. Tired eyes, day, old stubble, the faint tightening at the corners of his mouth that had been there more lately. He pushed the doubt down. The frontage road rose and fell gently, drifting through low swales of land where the fog or something like it settled in thin layers. His beams carved tunnels through it, the air ahead glowing a dull, suspended white before slipping away. After a few miles, another sign appeared. This way, Red Mesa Plaza, 2 miles. An arrow pointed ahead. His shoulders relaxed. He didn't realize how much until then. The lights showed before he saw any buildings. A soft halo above a slight rise, too steady and contained to be traffic. As he drew nearer, outlines coalesced. The wide rectangle of a parking lot, the familiar squat shape of the diner, the low canopy over the pumps. It looked different. Close enough now to see individual bulbs, he noticed that the diner sign was an older style, just block letters, no cartoon Mesa. The neon around the windows hummed faintly, glowing a flat, tired red instead of the newer, brighter tubes he remembered Ray bragging about installing last year. But the place was lit. That was what mattered. He swung his rig into the lot, gravel crunching under his tires at the edges where asphalt gave way to dirt. There were no other trucks, no cars either. Only his vehicle's lights swept across the lone row of fuel pumps and the dark glass of the diner window. It should have made him uneasy, that emptiness. Instead, he felt a subtle relief at the sight of 4 sturdy walls and a roof, of electric lights making a pool of certainty in the night. He set his brake, shut off the engine, and for a moment sat in the sudden quiet. The desert pressed close around the edges of the lot. The hum of the building's fluorescent lights reached his ears, faint but steady. He climbed down, boots hitting the cooled pavement with a small echo. The air smelled of dust and old oil, with the faintest thread of coffee and something fried drifting from inside. The diner door opened with a soft chime from a real bell, not an electronic tone. The warmth inside washed over him, heat from the kitchen, the smell of onions and coffee, the old vinyl booths shining dully under the lights. Behind the counter stood June. At least, she looked like June. Same short gray hair pulled back in a clip, same heavy glasses, same faded apron. She glanced up as the bell chimed and smiled, the expression reaching her eyes. "Marco," she said. "You're late." He blinked. "Yeah." "Construction." He hadn't said his name. The last time he'd been through was months ago. Even then, he'd never been enough of a regular for them to know him on site. Not really. Still, he told himself, some folks had uncanny memories. Besides, his company's logo was printed on his jacket. She could have read it and put 2 and 2 together. "Coffee?" she asked, already reaching for the pot. "Please." A man emerged from the kitchen doorway behind her with a towel over his shoulder. Ray, if it was really them. He seemed a little younger than Marco remembered, his belly not quite as round, fewer lines etched around his mouth. "Thought we'd lost you on that last storm," Ray said, nodding toward him. "Road washed out near 91. "That was years ago," Marco started to say, but the words tangled before they reached his mouth. A radio sat on a high shelf near the end of the counter, its casing the old faux wood kind he hadn't seen in a long time. It crackled quietly, picking up some distant station. A newscaster's voice cut through for a moment. "Crews are still working to clear the wreckage from last night's pileup west of exit 212, the announcer said. "Authorities confirm multiple injuries and ask drivers to avoid the area if possible." The sound fuzzed, then shifted to static, then to a slow country song crackling with static. June tapped the radio lightly with her knuckles. "Always goes funny when the weather's bad," she muttered. Marco wrapped his fingers around the warm mug she set before him. The ceramic felt solid, real. The coffee smelled exactly like Red Mesa's always had. He sipped. It tasted right, too strong, a little bitter, with that hint of something indefinable he'd always chalked up to old equipment and hard water, but his eyes kept snagging on little things around the room. The calendar on the wall near the register showed a month and year too far back. October. 10 years earlier. A glossy picture of a red canyon. One of the days had a circle drawn around it, in red pen. The circle date matched the night of a memory he tried hard not to revisit often. Darkness, rain where there shouldn't have been rain, slick pavement, headlights suddenly too close, the sickening slow-motion slide of his trailer fishtailing, the hard jolt as his cab hit something, the world turning sideways. He blinked, pulling himself back. On the far wall, a corkboard held photographs under curling tape. Most were of trucks parked out front, drivers grinning in the sun, some with families, some alone, all with dates scribbled underneath. A few showed the plaza in winter storms, the pumps iced over, the diner lights glowing through curtains of white. A cluster of other pictures hung a little apart from the rest. These were smaller, more faded. No one smiled in them. Faces were softer, candid, caught mid-laugh or mid-sentence. Some were Polaroids, their chemistry-aged colors, strange and flat. Under each, the same careful, blocky handwriting had written a name and then, in parentheses, a single word. Elias, stayed. Carmen, stayed. Rod, stayed. The hair on Marco's arms lifted. He glanced at the analog clock by the kitchen pass-through. Its hands read 3:07. The second hand ticked smoothly. Been getting enough rest, Marco? June's voice came, easy and conversational. You look beat. Long week, he said. I'll be fine after this. Got to make Phoenix by morning. Ray leaned on the far end of the counter, cleaning a glass that looked already spotless. Road's not good tonight, he remarked. Fog'll get thicker. Might be better to stretch out in the cab for a few hours. Beat the sun and the worst of it together. It was the kind of advice any seasoned owner would give a driver looking worn, sensible, kind. But something in his tone had the same feel as the handwriting under the photos on the wall, deliberate, practiced. The bell over the door chimed softly behind Marco. He half turned. A young man had come in, maybe mid-20s, hands shoved in the pockets of a worn denim jacket. Dark hair fell into his eyes. He looked around the diner quickly, like someone arriving in a place he knew too well and wishing he didn't. His gaze snagged on Marco and held for a second, something unreadable in it. Then he moved to a corner booth and slid in, sitting with his back to the wall and his eyes facing the room. June filled a second mug and carried it over without being asked. Evening, Tyler, she said gently. You're out late. Got turned around, he muttered. His voice was low, but carried. Took the wrong exit. Long as you made it here, she said. You just sit a while. Marco stared into his coffee. The steam rose in faint curls. He took another sip, then set the mug down carefully. His phone lay face down on the counter. He flipped it over. No signal bars, no data. Just the time in the corner. 2:58 a.m. The clock by the kitchen still read 3:07. You all right? June asked, her attention snapping back to him with a focus that felt almost too sharp. Yeah, he said automatically. Just tired. A soft scraping sounded from the corner booth. The young man Tyler had gotten up and was approaching the counter, his steps quiet on the worn floor. Don't stay, he said quietly, not quite looking at Marco as he spoke. You should get back on the road before the clock turns. June's shoulders stiffened. Hush now, she said, a note of sharpness under the words. He's been driving. He needs to rest. Tyler's jaw clenched. He lifted his eyes fully to meet Marco's. There was something behind them, a kind of contained fear, or anger, or both. You know that sign a few miles back? He said, ignoring June. The one that said last food and fuel for 120 miles? Marco nodded slowly. There's another plaza 50 miles west, Tyler said. Brand new, big chain, lights you can see from lands away. You've stopped there before, haven't you? Marco realized, with a small jolt, that he had. Twice, when he'd missed Red Mesa. He could picture it now. Wide, clean parking lot, automatic doors, overlit aisles of snacks. He hadn't thought about it when he'd seen the billboard. Somehow it had slipped right past that memory and settled on the familiar cartoon Mesa instead. You won't make it there if you wait, Tyler added, voice low. Not from here. June set her coffee pot down a little too hard. The dark liquid inside sloshed. Don't scare the man, she said, forcing a laugh that didn't land right. You always talk nonsense when you blow in like this. Ray's jaw moved as if he were chewing something that wasn't in his mouth. Folks who push tired on that road don't always get through, he said, looking at Marco steadily. We just give them a place to stop. That's all. The words sounded right. The way someone who had seen too many near misses and wrecks might talk. But the air in the diner felt thicker now, as if it had gained weight. Marco glanced again at the wall of photographs. Up close, he could see that some of the images were decades old. Hairstyles, truck models, the way the film had aged. Others were more recent. One near the bottom showed a blue rig not unlike his own parked at an angle before the diner. The driver leaned against the bumper, grinning, a paper cup in hand. Underneath, in that same careful block print, was written, Tyler stayed. The young man beside him watched his eyes find the picture. Sometimes, Tyler said, almost under his breath, you pull off just to close your eyes for a minute, just to let the hum in your head settle. And when you try to go again, you can't quite seem to get back on the main road. June's hand tightened around the coffee pot's handle. For a heartbeat, her smile flattened, as if she were holding something in place by sheer will. You're scaring our guest, she said again. He's not one of yours. Marco pushed his mug away, the ceramic scraping softly on the counter. How long have I been here? He asked. June blinked. Oh, hardly at all, 10 minutes maybe. His phone screen said 3:19 a.m. The wall clock still said 3:07. Outside the picture window, his truck sat where he'd left it. Headlights dark, red marker lights glowing softly. Beyond it, the desert was just a black plain. No sign of the interstate lights. No passing traffic. His pulse thudded in his ears. Thank you for the coffee, he said, voice a little hoarser than he intended. I should get going. Ray straightened, towel forgotten on his shoulder. You can bunk in the lot, he suggested quickly. Safe here. Let the worst pass. It's safer than out there, June added, and this time there was nothing soft in her tone. It bordered on pleading. Tyler took a small step back, as if giving him room to move. If you're leaving, he said quietly, don't look in the mirror until you're on the highway. The bell over the door chimed as Marco pushed it open. The night air hit him like a splash of cold water, clearing some of the haze that had pressed in around his thoughts. Behind him, the murmur of voices resumed, low and overlapping. He couldn't make out words. He crossed the lot quickly, boots scuffing on the worn asphalt. His truck's cab loomed large and familiar, a shape he'd trusted across 1,000 miles of daylight and dark. Climbing up into the driver's seat felt like re-entering a space that truly belonged to him. He turned the key. For a second, nothing happened. Then the engine coughed and caught, the vibrations running up through the seat into his spine. The dash lights flared. The clock on the display blinked 2:41 a.m. He shifted into gear and rolled slowly out of the lot. In his side window, the diner's front glowed, neon buzzing quietly. Through the glass, he could see June moving behind the counter, Ray at the kitchen pass-through, Tyler back in his corner booth. None of them looked out as he left. The frontage road stretched ahead, empty and darker than before. He kept his eyes on the narrow lane, resisting the urge to glance into the mirrors. Tyler's warning clung to him like a second skin. At first, the going felt sluggish. The truck seemed to resist him, as if the slight rise in the road were steeper than it looked. The glow from Red Mesa faded slowly behind him, then quickly, shrinking to a small red flicker. After what felt like much longer than it should, he saw pale, moving light-ahead headlights crossing an overpass, the distant flow of real traffic. Then, without any clear marker of change, he was suddenly at the merge point for exit 212. The detour signs were gone. Instead, the proper green exit sign stood where it had always been. 212. Service Area. Red Mesa Plaza. An arrow pointed to the right. Orange barrels, which had flanked the ramp in his earlier memory, were nowhere in sight. A laminated notice under the sign flapped in the wind, safety orange and official. As he passed under the overhead lights, its black letters became briefly clear. Exit 212 closed. No services. Structure fire. Facility destroyed. Use alternate stops. His hands tightened on the wheel. Instinct made him look right. toward where the plaza should have been a cluster of buildings standing off the road, neon humming. In the quick wash of his passing headlights, the land beyond the ramp showed only char and emptiness. A cracked slab of blackened concrete, a few twisted metal beams jutting at odd angles, the ghost of a foundation, nothing more. The desert had already begun to reclaim the lot, scrub pushing up through fractures in the pavement. The air through the cracked window smelled faintly of something that had once burned, long ago, and never quite let go of the scent. Marco's stomach turned cold. He drove on. An hour later, lights from the chain plaza 50 miles west rose out of the night, just where Tyler had said they would be. The place was bustling even at that hour. Rows of trucks, chatter on the pumps, automatic doors sighing open and closed. Inside, bathed in fluorescent brightness, he watched drivers laugh, order, fill out receipts. A muted TV in the corner displayed the news. A tiny banner at the bottom of the screen mentioned, "Anniversary of the Red Mesa Plaza fire, 10 years since electrical fault destroyed beloved local stop." A grainy photograph of the old diner flashed up for a second. June and Ray stood in front, younger, waving at the camera. The sound was too low to hear details, but the image alone made his throat dry. He forced himself to breathe, to focus on the normal chaos around him. Later, back in his cab, he opened his logbook. Under the entry for that night, without remembering when he'd written it, he found 2 short words in his own handwriting, squeezed into the margin beside exit 212. "Don't stay." He stared at the phrase for a long time, then shut the book and set it aside. On the next trip along that route, he didn't look toward exit 212 at all. He kept his eyes on the white lines, the faint glow ahead. His GPS suggested the chain plaza at mile 262 for rest. He followed that. Still, every so often when he was tired, when the desert stretched ahead like an endless road into nothing, his navigation screen would flicker. For a second, just long enough to register, the words, "Frontage RD, Red Mesa Plaza, open 24 hours," would appear as an option. He would reach out, thumb poised above the screen. Then he'd pull his hand back and unplug the unit. Out there in the dark, some places offered warmth and coffee because kind people had built them. They stood on foundations you could walk on in daylight and touch with your hand. Other places, maybe, were built of something else entirely, of nights that went wrong, of drivers who closed their eyes just for a minute and never quite made it back to the main road. Marco still liked the desert best when it belonged to almost no one. He just made sure, now, that when it tried to offer him shelter in the wrong place, at the wrong time, he kept his wheels moving, his eyes on the next honest exit, and his hands firmly on his own steering wheel. Story number 4. Darius never liked the new camera. The company had installed them in every cab that spring little black rectangles mounted up near the headliner, watching both the road and the driver. Outward, inward, they called it. Forward-facing to catch collisions. Driver-facing to catch everything else. "It's about safety," the safety manager had said. All earnest eyes and printed charts. If you start to nod off, it'll alert you. If you're on your phone, it'll ping you. We can coach, you can get home in one piece. Everybody wins. Darius understood the logic. He'd seen what could happen when a driver pushed too hard, when a moment's lapse meant bad luck. He'd helped pull a kid from a ditch once while flares burned and sirens wailed in the distance. He didn't argue about safety, but he didn't like being watched while he drove. The cab was his space. His rolling apartment, his slice of privacy between shippers and receivers and way stations. Now, a lens was always there, quietly recording. The first few weeks, he forgot about it only sometimes. He'd catch himself glancing up at the little green light in the corner, wondering if it was really on all the time. The safety team said it only saved clips when it detected events, a hard brake, a sudden swerve, a prolonged yawn. "That's creepy," his dispatcher had muttered over the phone, "like it's waiting for you to look tired." Tonight, the light stared down at Darius while he pushed west through a long, empty stretch of interstate. It was near midnight, somewhere between Nashville and Little Rock. The weather had turned early. Cold rain sheeted across the windshield, blown sideways by a stiff crosswind. Wipers beat a steady, squeaking rhythm. The road hissed under his tires. The CB was mostly quiet. Every once in a while, a voice would crackle through about mile markers and bare reports, then fade back into static. His own radio murmured low, more white noise than music now. He'd intended to stop 2 hours earlier. A mechanical delay back at the shipper had eaten his margin. The customer still expected the load before noon. He could technically make it within his hours of service if he kept rolling and didn't waste time. The next big truck stop worth a shower and a real meal was a good 60 miles ahead. The small ones he'd passed already had been packed, rigs stacked in every available corner, hazard lights blinking in the dark. He'd rolled through one lot, hoping for a single open slot, and found none. So he drove. The road flattened into one of those long, straight stretches that made the horizon seem to hang in place. His headlights bored a tunnel through the rain. Beyond them, there was only a vague suggestion of trees, of fields, of dark land slipping by. His eyes burned a little. He rolled his shoulders, took a deep breath, and reached for his travel mug. Lukewarm coffee met his tongue stale, but better than nothing. The camera blinked. A soft chime rang from a speaker near his overhead console. The green light on the black rectangle flashed yellow, then settled back. On the dash screen, a small notification popped up. Drowsiness event. Eyes closed. 1.4 seconds. Was not, he muttered. He was certain he hadn't actually shut his eyes. Maybe blink slow, sure, long day. But the system didn't usually trigger on a single slow blink. It needed a pattern. That was what they'd said. Still, he couldn't exactly argue with the sensor. He rolled the window down another inch. Cold, wet air knifed in, snapping him a little clearer. Happy now? He told the camera. The green light stared back. 10 miles later, the rain thickened. Water on the road pooled in faint sheen that caught his beams and flung the light back, making it harder to read the surface. He eased his speed back a few miles an hour, feeling for the right balance between control and momentum. The chime sounded again. This time, the text on the dash was different. Additional occupant detected. Verify seatbelt use. Darius glanced automatically at the passenger seat. Empty. The worn fabric glowed gray in the muted light from the dash. His spare jacket lay folded across the cushion. The cup holder next to it held an unopened bottle of water. Nothing else. He flicked his eyes toward the sleeper area in the rearview mirror clipped above the windshield. The bottom bunk was made tight, blanket folded. The top bunk was latched up. No one. Nothing. False positive, he said under his breath. The system wasn't perfect. It used infrared to detect shapes and heat, the safety guy had explained. And sometimes shadows confused it. His jacket draped just so. Maybe. Or the way the curtain fell. Still, a tiny knot formed in his stomach. He leaned over just enough to tap the little touchscreen mounted near the shifter, the one tied into the camera system. A small icon pulsed in the corner, indicating a new event had been recorded. He opened it. A grainy, low-light still image filled the screen, time-stamped with the last few seconds. It showed the cab from the camera's vantage point. His own profile at the wheel. The curve of the passenger seat. The rectangle of the sleeper in the background. On the passenger seat, his jacket lay just where he knew it was. On the lower bunk behind him, something else Saturday. The picture was murky, all shades of gray and black. The camera, working in infrared, washed details out, but the shape on the bunk was clear enough, a darker mass, where there should have been only the smooth spread of the blanket. It looked like someone sitting cross-legged on the mattress, torso hunched slightly, head bent, no features, no clothing he could pick out. Just a human outline made of shadow. Darius's fingers tightened on the wheel. Rain drummed harder on the roof. The wipers squealed. The road ahead seemed to pull tight, a narrow lane floating in darkness. He blinked, hard, and forced a rough exhale. Glitch, he said, more firmly this time. The camera's software was sensitive. Shadows, movement, shifting light, it could all stack wrong. He'd seen videos in the safety office of jackets mistaken for people, of seatbacks flagged as occupants. He tapped the screen to close the image. Outside, a green sign flashed by, half lost in the rain. Exit 140, 2, County, Road 9. Below it, another warned of limited services. The company route kept him on the interstate. No reason to take smaller roads in this weather. He drove. The minutes bled together. The rain never let up. The world beyond his headlights remained a dull, roiling blur. When the chime sounded again, irritation flared before fear. What now? He muttered. Sleeper occupancy while vehicle in motion. Safety warning. The message on the dash read. His throat went dry. He glanced in the rearview mirror. For a second, only a quick, heart-skipping second, he thought he saw an impression in the mattress. Not a shape exactly. More the way light and shadow suggested weight where none should be. A subtle dip in the gray of the blanket, as if something had just shifted its position. Then the truck hit a patch of rough pavement. The mirror vibrated furiously, smearing the image. When it steadied again, the bunk looked ordinary. He swallowed. With one hand, he hit the call button on the dash and barked for the safety line. Control. This is truck 8649 on I-40 westbound near mile 150, he said when the connection clicked. I'm getting faulty cab occupancy alerts. Sleeper passenger seat. Can someone at your end check the feed and reset this thing? It's distracting. A pause, then a rustle of movement and keys. A man's voice came on, slightly tinny. Truck 8649, this is Tom in safety. I see you. Weather's rough, huh? Yeah, Darius said. Camera's glitching. Says I've got somebody in here with me. That so? There was something in Tom's tone, curiosity, not quite humor. Hold on. Let me pull the events. Darius watched the white lines slide under his headlights, while silence hummed on the line. Okay, Tom said after a few seconds. I'm looking at your last 3 clips. Russell. Click. Darius pictured him squinting at a bank of monitors, somewhere in a warm office, 1,000 miles from the cold hiss of his windshield. I see a drowsiness flag, Tom went on. Not too bad. You look more bored than tired. And, he trailed off. And? Darius prompted. Another pause. Longer this time. System logged an additional occupant, Tom said slowly. Sleeper area. But I'm not seeing anyone in this frame. That's what I'm telling you, Darius snapped, nerves creeping into his voice. There's nobody back there. That bunk's been empty since I left the yard. Tom didn't answer right away. When he did, his tone had shifted. You headed past mile 173 tonight? He asked. Yeah. Straight shot, why? Thought so. Paper rustled again on his end, like he was checking notes that weren't on a computer. We get sensitive readings around that stretch. Infrared sees funny things. At least, that's what the vendor says. You mean it's a known issue? Officially? It's a calibration problem, Tom replied. Unofficially? He hesitated. Just don't let it get in your head. You're steering steady, no lane deviation. You're fine. Next major truck stop's at mile 198. Make it there. Take a good break. Can you turn the alerts off until then? Darius asked. Can't disable safety features in motion, Tom said, apology in his voice. Policy. I can put a note on your file to disregard occupancy flags for this leg. Darius blew out a frustrated breath. Great. And Darius? Tom added, voice dropping a notch. If it calls you drowsy, believe it, even if you feel okay. Especially along that corridor. The line clicked, then went dead. The rain eased, then came back harder, in waves. His dashboard clock climbed steadily. According to his log, he had the hours to make the truck stop, but not a lot of slack for slowing. The chime sounded again. This time, 2 messages overlapped in quick succession. Additional occupant detected. Passenger seatbelt unfastened. Driver status. Micro drowsiness. Elevated risk. A low, insistent tone followed. Not loud enough to hurt, but impossible to ignore. A soft female voice, part of the system, repeated in calm cadence. Driver drowsy. Please take a break. Driver drowsy. Please take a break. I'm fine, he muttered. But his eyes burned more now, and the edges of his vision felt softer than they should. He raised his gaze just enough to check the lane offsets on the instrument panel. He was centered. No drift. Grip on the wheel solid. But somewhere under the surface of his awareness, a slow ache bloomed at the base of his skull. On instinct, he flicked to the camera view again. The fresh still image made his breath catch. The frame showed him at the wheel, jaw tight, eyes slightly narrowed against the rain. The passenger seat this time did not look empty. A shape sat there, turned slightly toward him. It had the rough outline of a person. Shoulders, A suggestion of a head, arms folded in its lap. The details were smeared by the infrared, as if the camera couldn't quite decide where the edges were. The face was a blur, features lost in gray static. One thing stood out. Where the hand closest to him should be, the shape's arm angled not down toward its own lap, but outward. The blurred mass at the end of the limb pointed toward the windshield, toward the road ahead. Darius's heart thudded hard, then harder again. The truck's headlights washed over a reflective sign. Drowsy driving crash area. Next 20 miles. Stay alert. Some part of his memory stirred. He'd heard about this stretch, not in meetings but at truck stop counters, over free coffee that tasted of cardboard. Drivers talked about a pileup years back, fog, night, a car with a family in it stopped half on the shoulder. A dozing driver who never even hit the brakes. Stories grew in the telling. Some said the car had caught fire. Some said it hadn't, but everyone agreed the pictures had been bad. Them new cameras pick up hitchhikers sometimes, one old hand had said once, half a smile on his lips, like he didn't want to believe his own words. The ones you don't see when you look. They ride along till you either stop in time or you don't. Darius had rolled his eyes then and gone back to his sandwich. Now, the image of that blurred hand pointing forward sat heavy in his mind. He blinked hard, twice, and dragged his eyes back to the road. Up ahead, the glow of taillights appeared in the distance. A low hill rose, its crest hazy through the rain. The truck's forward collision warnings remained quiet. For now, the drowsiness tone kept chiming, steady and patient. Driver drowsy? Please take a break. He weighed his options. No official pullout for miles. No wide shoulders recommended in this weather. A random stop on the narrow margin of a bridge or bend could be worse than pushing on. But if he really was more tired than he realized, his gaze slid to the right. A sign, half overshadowed by low branches, blinked past. Truck pull, off 1/2 mile. He hadn't seen one marked on his route. The rain, for the first time that hour, softened to a mist. The world ahead brightened by a fraction. The red taillights in the distance winked out of view as the road curved. The low female voice repeated in his cab, "Please take a break." His hands tightened around the wheel. "Okay," he said to himself, to the camera, to whatever else might be listening. "Okay." He flipped on his signal. The pull-off appeared almost exactly where the sign had promised, a wide gravel apron carved into the right side of the highway, separated from the main lanes by a run of rumble strips and a short guardrail. No other trucks occupied it. Just dark, wet stone, and a small, weather-beaten sign that read, "Emergency stopping only." He pulled in anyway. His tires crunched over the gravel. The truck's motion slowed, then halted. He set the brake. The engine's rumble dropped to an idle, a low, soothing vibration through the floor. The drowsiness alarm cut off mid-phrase. Inside the cab, a thick, sudden quiet pressed in. The rain on the roof sounded louder now, more individual drops than constant sheet. For a moment, he just sat, hands still on the wheel, waiting for something, another chime, a voice, a knock on the door. Nothing came. In the mirror, the lower bunk looked as it always did. Empty, smooth. He forced himself to count to 60. Then another 60. Out on the highway, a low roar grew, then swelled. Headlights streaked past beyond the guardrail, a cluster of vehicles moving faster than was wise in this weather. Darius watched their light smear on the wet asphalt. He almost missed the change in sound. The normal rush of passing traffic carried a certain pitch. A whoosh. Then quiet. Then another. This was different. A long, rising shriek of brakes. The crunch of something heavy and unwilling grinding against something else. Then, faintly, a series of hollow bangs rolled across the wet air, separated by heartbeats, metal hitting metal. The sudden blare of a horn held too long, then cut off. Darius's chest went tight. Far up the road, beyond the curve, an orange flicker appeared against the low clouds, the reflection of hazard lights multiplied by rain. He stared, unable to move for a few seconds. Then, slowly, he reached up and tapped the camera screen. The last saved event loaded, time-stamped for the moment just before he'd taken the exit into the pull-off. His own face looked more drawn than he'd expected. Fatigue etched in small lines he usually ignored. On the lower bunk behind him, The darkness was uniform now. No suggestion of a shape, no blurred outline, nothing sitting cross-legged, nothing pointing, just a smoothed blanket. He scrolled backward. The previous frame still showed the seated figure, arm extended. The one before that showed it closer to the head of the bunk, as if it had shifted forward over time. He went back farther, to the first occupancy alert. In that earliest still, the shape was barely there. A deeper patch of gray in the corner of the mattress, huddled small, indistinct. Looking at it now, it reminded him uncomfortably of someone curled up, knees to chest, in restless if not quite peaceful sleep. He stared at that image until the screen dimmed. Ahead on the highway, sirens finally rose a distant, wavering sound. Blue and red flashes joined the orange, staining the low clouds with color. Darius sat in his idling truck, rain ticking lightly against the glass, the camera's green light steady and unblinking above him. He didn't feel alone exactly. But whatever had sat on that bunk with him, whatever the camera had been willing to see when his eyes could not felt farther away now, loosened. He reached for his phone. Tom at safety answered on the second ring, voice sharp with sudden wakefulness. "Control, Tom." It triggered again, Darius said, skipping the greeting. "Occupant. Drowsy. I pulled off at a truck apron near 173. There's a wreck up ahead. I think." He trailed off. The words felt strange, even to him. Tom didn't laugh. Didn't question what he couldn't yet see. "I'll mark your event," he said instead, voice steady. "Time, location. We'll correlate with whatever the state posts." "You okay?" "I'm sitting upright and breathing," Darius said. "That'll do." Another pause. "Keep that camera on," Tom added quietly. "Some guys cover them up with tape. I don't think that's a good idea on that stretch. Sometimes they see what we don't. Or they see it sooner." "Yeah," Darius murmured. He hung up and leaned his head back against the seat. Later, when the road reopened and he rolled slowly past the scene, emergency vehicles still scattered. Flares burning in the ditches, he kept his eyes on his lane and his speed low. He didn't look too closely at the shapes in the rain. Days after, an internal email went around the fleet, praising an unnamed driver for heeding drowsiness alerts and stopping before a major crash area, credited with avoiding potential involvement. Policy reminders about trusting the system followed, couched in corporate language. It didn't mention the occupancy flags. It didn't mention the corridor by mile 173, or the way the camera sometimes caught the outline of someone sharing the cab when no one was logged on the manifest. Darius still didn't like being watched. He still thought about covering the lens sometimes when he wanted to sing loud and off-key or talk to himself in the long, lonely miles. But when the weather turned bad and the hours stretched thin, and the road ahead narrowed into a dark ribbon with no easy turnouts, he found himself glancing up at that little green light with something almost like gratitude. On some nights, as the interstate ran straight and empty and his eyelids grew heavy, the camera would chime before he realized he'd started to slump. The soft voice would tell him, again and again, to take a break. And when he passed mile 173 inches the rain, if the screen ever told him there was someone in his passenger seat or on his bunk when he knew with every rational part of his mind that he was alone, he didn't argue with it. He checked his mirrors, found the first safe place to pull over, and let the unseen passenger ride with him only as far as that. Story number 5. The overnight run through the Appalachians was supposed to be routine. Sam had taken that corridor between Roanoke and Charleston more times than he could count. Long, winding climbs, long, winding descents, rock faces looming on one side and black valleys falling away on the other. He liked it better at night. Less traffic, fewer brake lights to clutter the darkness. His tractor's engine thrummed steady as he pulled the loaded trailer up another grade. Outside, the world was narrowed to what the headlights could carve out of the fog that had rolled down from the ridges. Pale wisps coiled across the road, thickening in the low spots. The radio had gone quiet 20 minutes back. Even the stations that usually bled over from nearby towns were nothing but faint static now. The CB hissed on Channel 19, picking up the occasional far-off crackle that never quite formed into words. He checked his dash clock. 1:53 a.m. Another green sign slid past on the right, half shrouded in fog. I-64, West, Charleston, 117. Beneath it, an orange portable sign flashed in rhythm with its own reflection in the wet pavement. Construction ahead. All trucks exit 96, detour. Sam frowned. He hadn't heard a word about night construction. His company's route notes said nothing. The GPS map on his dash showed a smooth, continuous path along the interstate. No closures, no warnings. Still, the orange sign wasn't something he could ignore. State troopers took a dim view of tractor trailers plowing into active work zones. He clicked the CB. "Any word on that detour at 96? He asked the empty static. "Westbound." No answer. Fog wrapped tighter around the truck as he approached the exit. Another electronic board loomed out of it. "Trucks exit, Old Quarry Road detour. Local traffic only beyond." Old Quarry Road. Sam knew the name. Or rather, he knew to avoid it. The company routing software always showed it as a thin gray line hugging the side of the mountain, a spiderweb of hairpins that paralleled the interstate for a few miles. "No trucks recommended," his training had said. "Old pavement, poor shoulders. Take I-64. Apparently, tonight, there was no option. He eased onto the ramp. The truck's turn signal ticked loud in the cab, a small metronome in the quiet. The ramp curved down, then leveled. The fog thickened until the beams seemed to press against it. For a moment, it was like driving into the inside of a cloud, the world reduced to the wet scratch of wipers and the hum of tires on unseen pavement. Then the fog thinned just enough to reveal a narrow two-lane road ahead, bordered by a guardrail on the left and a rock wall on the right. A leaning green sign marked it with peeling white letters. Old Quarry Red. Truck detour. He downshifted, letting the engine brake hold him as much as it could. The truck settled into a slow, controlled crawl. As he rounded the first bend, the highway disappeared from view above and behind him. There was only the cliff face, the drop, and the road squeezed between them like a thread. The fog moved strangely here. It didn't drift in wide, even sheets like on the interstate. It pooled in hollows, clung to some stretches of road, and left others oddly clear. His lights caught it in bursts. He took another curve, then another. The guardrail on his left appeared, and vanished in slices, slick with moisture, its posts leaning slightly outward, where rock slides had nudged them. The CB crackled. It was a sharp, sudden burst, like someone had turned on a radio in the next room. "Anyone on Old Quarry, westbound," a voice said, faint beneath layers of static. Sam thumbed the mic. "Yeah, this is westbound, just off 96. "Who's that?" Static swallowed the response at first. Then it thinned, as if the signal slid into a clearer pocket. "Get off that road," the voice said. Sam's grip tightened on the wheel. "Say again?" he asked. "Don't take Old Quarry, not tonight." It wasn't the warning itself that made his skin prickle. It was the sound of the voice. It sounded like his. Not exactly. The timbre was a little flatter, the breath a touch rougher. But the cadence, the way certain words stretched and others clipped it, was like listening to a recording of himself on a bad speaker. "Who is this?" he demanded, forcing a note of annoyance into his tone. "You messing around with a voice changer?" No answer. The CB dropped back into a low hiss. "Forget it," he muttered. Ahead, his headlights caught a reflective triangle, a warning for a sharp curve. 20 miles per hour suggested. He eased off the throttle, watching the trailer in his side mirror as it obediently followed the arc of the bend. On the far side, the road straightened for a short stretch. Trees loomed on the valley side, their bare branches clawing at the fog. The mountain's rock face glistened on the other, water weeping from the stone in thin streams. Another sign appeared, half swallowed by moss. "Watch for falling rock." Sam had just enough time to think, "That's comforting," before the CB hissed again. "Brake now," the familiar, not familiar voice said. He didn't question it. His foot went to the pedal out of pure reflex. Even as a part of his mind spat, "This is stupid." The truck slowed, front end dipping slightly. 20 yards ahead, something large and dark materialized from the fog on the right. A chunk of rock, the size of a compact car, lay half in his lane, half against the cliff face. Smaller debris was scattered around it, shattered fragments glittering wetly in his beams. He drew in a sharp breath. At his current crawl, he had plenty of room to go around, hugging the left side of the lane and inching past with the trailer's tandems kissing the painted line. But at full detour speed, he imagined coming around that bend at 35, fog thicker, his mind on the hill instead of the unknown. There would have been nowhere to go. The back of his neck prickled. He eased past the rock, mirrors clearing the obstruction by inches. As soon as the trailer straightened out, he picked up the mic. "Whoever's on this channel, I don't know what you're pulling, but that was a good call," he said. "You see that fall ahead of me?" Nothing. He listened to the empty hiss for a full 30 seconds. No reply. No non-committal chuckle. Nothing. He set the mic back in its cradle. Fog hugged close again, the world pitching and rolling mildly with each twist of the road. Here and there, he passed old, abandoned driveways that vanished into the trees, their mailbox posts leaning at tired angles. The GPS on his dash showed a straight gray line roughly paralleling the interstate. No details, no side roads. The detour wasn't even labeled. A small triangle blinked where his truck should be. The estimated time to rejoin I-64 ticked upward, then downward, as the unit tried to recalculate and failed. "Make up your mind," he told it. The CB came back alive. This time there was no buildup of static, no gradual formation of words. The voice appeared fully formed, like someone had keyed up the mic right beside him. "Next curve, the guardrail's gone," it said. "Stay to the right, hug the wall." Sam's heart thumped once, hard. "Where are you?" he asked. No answer. He considered ignoring it. The idea of letting some anonymous voice steer his decisions on a black mountain road rubbed his instincts the wrong way. But the memory of that boulder still sat fresh behind his ribs. A yellow diamond sign flashed in his beams ahead. Sharp curve. A wavy arrow indicated a tight S-bend. The fog beyond it looked thicker, as if the air itself were braced against something. He slowed further. The first part of the S-turn dipped left, then right. As he rounded the second half, his headlights swept across the valley side. The guardrail, where it should have continued unbroken, simply stopped. The posts ended 3/4 of the way through the curve, replaced by a gaping section of open air. Beyond it, the world dropped away into dark, indistinct space. The edge of the pavement crumbled, a jagged mouth. The asphalt looked torn, a few feet of it simply gone, scooped out by some unseen slide. A patch of darker road surface angled further toward the cliff wall on the right, as if an emergency repair crew had thrown down new pavement in a pinch, cutting a narrower line through the bend. Sam steered onto that darker patch, tires humming differently as they crossed. He imagined, again, taking this curve too wide. The trailer's momentum, the missing rail, the long, empty drop. A chill that had nothing to do with the cab's temperature slipped down his spine. He cleared the damaged section and let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Okay," he said into the CB, keeping his voice level. "You've got my attention. You gonna tell me your name now?" Silence. He stayed on Old Quarry for what felt like much longer than the few miles it actually spanned. The mountain seemed to fold in over the road, the cliffs closer, the valley deeper, the fog thicker where it pooled in low pockets. Every so often, the CB would hiss or pop, but no words came. Then, as he eased through a long descending curve, the kind that looked gentle until you were deep in it, the voice cut in again, sharper now. "Don't stop at the overlook," it said. "Don't look at it. Just go by." "Buddy, there is no overlook on this road," Sam said, trying for a humor he didn't feel. He was wrong. The curve unwound into a short straight. Off to the left, a patch of asphalt jutted out from the road, ending abruptly at a low stone barrier. A broken wooden sign leaned nearby, offering the ghost of letters. Ridgeview. Through a rent in the fog for a heartbeat, he saw it. Black space dropping away, then a faint, distant constellation of town lights far below. Winking through the mist, something darker lay at the near edge of the pull-off. In the split-second sweep of his headlights, he caught the edge of a twisted metal shape, resting at an angle against the low wall. A truck cab? A trailer? It was hard to say. The lines had been crushed, bent, blurred. Reflective tape shimmered on its surface. White letters stood out for a moment on a dark panel, backwards in his mirror, then too small to read. His stomach lurched. He kept his hands locked on the wheel and his foot steady on the throttle, doing exactly as the voice had said. He rolled past the overlook without slowing. Only when the fog closed in completely behind him did he realize his breathing had gone shallow. The CB crackled once, then again. "Did you see it?" the voice asked, softer. Sam hesitated. "What was that wreck?" he said. "How long has it been there?" On the other end of the ether, Something like a rough exhale came through the static. Too long, the voice said. Long enough the road remembers. Long enough the company doesn't put it in orientation. The hair on Sam's arm stood up. Who are you? He asked. You sound like me. Silence stretched. After a moment, the voice replied, Maybe I'm just what you sound like on this road, in this weather. It wasn't an answer. But Sam let it slide. The goal was pavement and lights and a wide, normal interstate lane under his wheels again. 2 more curves. One narrow bridge with old stonework, its edges slick with moss. A steep little dip that made his stomach float for an instant. Then, ahead through the thinning fog, he saw it. Green reflective signs. Overhead lights. The raised line of the real highway. Old Quarry RDNs. Merge 164 West. Relief washed through him in a slow tide. His shoulders dropped to Kuden's fraction. The engine's tone changed as he climbed the last short ramp and merged back onto the smooth, wide lanes. Traffic, sparse but reassuring, flowed around him. A set of taillights appeared ahead, someone else pushing through the night. The fog up here hung higher, not as thick. The world felt bigger again. He clicked the CB. Whoever you are, he said, I'm clear. I appreciate the heads up. The response came quicker this time. Stay on the interstate, the voice said. Next time you see a detour sign for Old Quarry, don't take it. Even if they light it up and flash it in your face, company'll understand. Next time? He echoed. Don't take it twice, the voice said. That's when the road stops letting you off. The channel went dead. He waited, half expecting another comment. A farewell, some cheap joke to cut the tension. Nothing. After a while, he turned the CB down to a low murmur. At mile 104, he pulled into a well-lit truck stop and parked among a neat row of sleepers. The lot smelled of diesel and damp asphalt. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The building's big windows shone yellow and ordinary. Inside, over a plate of eggs he only half tasted, he pulled out his phone and searched Old Quarry Road Crash. Stories came up. Not many, and all old. One from 10 years ago mentioned a loaded tanker that failed to make a curve in the fog, plunging over an overlook. No fatalities somehow, but severe injuries. The company name was familiar. His company, before a merger and rebranding. A grainy newspaper photo accompanied it. The wrecked cab lay on its side against a low stone barrier. The logo on the door was a younger, simpler version of the one on his own truck now. The driver wasn't named in the snippet he could see. He looked at the timestamp on his earlier construction detour notification. It didn't match anything on the state's website. According to the travel advisory page, there was no planned night work at exit 96. No closures. No official truck detour. His GPS history showed a brief off-route warning, then recalculated, as if he'd chosen Old Quarry on his own. All day, as he unloaded, reloaded, and turned his rig toward the next destination, the memory of that blurred wreck near the overlook tugged at him. So did the sound of the voice that had spoken through his CB. His own, but worn thin. Like it had been pulled across too many nights. On the return leg a week later, the weather was clear. No fog. Stars hung bright over the ridges. As he approached exit 96, he watched the roadside signs carefully. No orange boards, no flashing arrows. Just the ordinary green panels pointing to local routes and the smooth sweep of I-64 ahead. He stayed in the right lane, hands loose on the wheel, and did not even glance down the ramp toward Old Quarry. The CB was silent. He rolled on. Months went by. Other roads, other nights. Sometimes, when a detour appeared unexpectedly, he felt his pulse spike, wondering if the company's directions and the state's signs were going to disagree. If he ever saw Old Quarry RD truck detour again, he planned to ignore it. To take the warning ticket, if it came, over the alternative. On other runs, he heard drivers talk quietly about the mountain shortcuts, the Old Quarry Road, the places you didn't go unless you had no choice. No one had a current, clear story about it, just a sense that something happened there once, and that the road never quite let go. And on one long night, pushing east across another dark stretch, the CB crackled with sudden static near a curve. For a second, he thought he heard his own voice, warped and distant, bleed through the noise. Don't stop at the overlook, it almost said. He stayed in his lane, kept his hands steady, and drove on, away from the roads that curled too tightly around old memories, and toward the ones that still belonged only to the living. Story number 6. Nate always said an empty trailer had its own kind of voice. Loaded, a rig felt heavy and serious. Every bump turned into a low thud that rolled through the frame. Every gust of wind pushed, but didn't quite move it. Empty. Though empty was different. The box behind you shook and rattled, metal skin flexing, cross members humming a hollow tune. On certain stretches of road, it could sound like someone knocking from very far away. He told new guys that all the time. It was just physics, just noise. Most nights on the plains, that explanation was enough. This night, it wasn't. He was deadheading north out of Oklahoma City, heading toward Kansas City to pick up a fresh load by morning. The drop lot had signed off his paperwork with a bored flourish. Trailer 3,127. Empty. He'd watched the dock guy swing the doors, glanced inside at the bare scuffed floor and the single stack of broken pallets near the nose, then watched him close and seal it. Now, hours later, the highway ran straight and black ahead of him. The world a flat sheet broken only by the occasional fence line and the distant red blink of wind turbines. The sky was clear. No wind buffeted the cab. Air slid past the mirrors with a soft hiss. The dash clock glowed 2:11 a.m. His headlights caught a green sign on the right. I-135 North. Wichita 139. Kansas City 320. Nate settled a little deeper in his seat, the familiar ache between his shoulders a slow, dull knot. He'd grab a shower and a nap at the depot, once he was empty again. For now, it was just him, the road, the hum of tires, and the quiet murmur of the radio turned down low. The first knock came on a perfectly smooth stretch of asphalt. 3 crisp raps, spaced out like someone testing a door. They came from somewhere behind him, not the frame, not the cab, but the long, resonant box of the trailer. He frowned and glanced at his side mirror. The white rectangle behind him looked as it always did at night. Featureless, the reflective tape along the edges glowing. Another 3 knocks, then silence. He listened for a sway in the trailer, a vibration that matched the sound. Nothing. The truck rolled steady, the steering wheel light in his hands. Loose pallet, he said under his breath, like a diagnosis. Maybe one of the broken ones at the front had shifted. He clicked the CB. Northbound 35. Anybody else hearing that mess? He asked. More to fill the space than to get an answer. Static whispered back at him. No one close. He was in one of those long, lonely gaps between clusters of trucks. Minutes slid by. His mind began to settle again, smoothing the sound into the background of mechanical noise. Then the knocking came back. This time, it didn't sound like something sliding. It had a pattern. 3. Pause. 3. Longer pause. Louder somehow, as if whoever or whatever was making the noise had moved closer to the doors. Nate's skin tightened along his arms. He checked his mirrors again. Nothing unusual. The trailer's shadow flowed along the lane line, black on black. The highway ahead remained straight, the pavement in good shape. He tapped the brake lightly, easing his speed back a few miles an hour, then flicked on his turn signal and pulled onto the wide, empty shoulder. Gravel crackled under the tires as the rig rolled to a stop. He set the brake, the hiss of air loud in the quiet cab. For a moment, he just sat there, listening. The engine idled low. Air dryer purged with a sharp burst. Far off, a lone coyote yipped in the dark. No knocking. He grabbed his flashlight from the door pocket, pulled on his jacket, and climbed down. The night wrapped around him, big and cool and still. The sky was thick with stars. His boots crunched on the gravel as he walked back along the trailer. The reflective tape shone in the flashlight beam. The company name along the side was a little more faded than he liked. The letters ghosted from years of Sunday. At the rear doors, he ran the beam over the seal. The bright plastic tab was intact, cable uncut. He inspected the hinges, the hasps, the latch rods, all tight. He frowned, then dropped to one knee and shone the light under the trailer. No animals, no kids messing around, no one hitching a ride. Just dust, the underside of the frame, and far back, the stack of pallets faint as a suggestion through the gaps in the floorboards. He listened. The highway hissed softly as a car passed far in the distance. The night pressed in again after it. No knocks. He exhaled slowly, feeling a little foolish. Just empties being empties. Sound bounced strange in those big boxes sometimes. He walked back to the cab, climbed in, and shut the door with a solid thump. The quiet inside felt different now, more aware. As the truck eased back onto the highway, picking up speed, he kept half an ear tuned to the trailer. 10 minutes. 15. Then, 3 raps. Sharp and unmistakable. Nate's fingers curled tighter around the wheel. Not funny, he muttered at the empty road. The knocks came again, a little faster this time. In his side mirror, he thought just for an instant that he saw a shiver move along the rear doors, like something inside had pushed against them, hard enough to flex metal, not hard enough to open. His heart gave a short, hard kick. He picked up the CB mic. Northbound 35, about mile 187, he said. You got an empty trailer making racket? I'm hearing something weird. Static, then a crackle. A man's voice came through, older and rough, around the edges. Go ahead, northbound, it said. This is Cricket. Where'd you pick that box up? South side of Oklahoma City, Nate answered. Drop yard off 40. Tag says 3127. The pause on the other end stretched just a beat too long. You deadheading? The voice asked. Yeah, empty. Saw it myself. He hesitated, then added, Trailer's sealed though. Haven't broken it. Cricket made a low sound, halfway between a hum and a sigh. You near one? 90 yet? He asked. Coming up on it. Do not stop between 190 and the river, the older driver said. You hear me? Nate glanced at his GPS. The blue arrow crawled along the line. A thin ribbon of blue marked the Arkansas River up ahead. What's between 190 and the river? Nate asked. Another pause. Nothing you can fix, Cricket said. Just roll on through. The knocking started up again. Faster now. 3, pause, 3, pause, 3, 3, 3, 3, like whoever was doing it had lost patience and was just pounding. It rattled the cab in a way he could feel, not just hear. He swallowed. You hear that? He asked into the mic. The CB hissed. For a second there was no reply. Then faintly, I don't have to hear it. I've run that road a long time. Nate let out an unsteady breath he hoped didn't carry over the radio. The sign for mile 190 flashed by on his right. He fought the impulse to pull over again. Everything practical in him wanted to stop, check the doors, check the tires, make sure nothing had come loose back there that could become a problem. Everything else in him stayed his hand. The knocks continued, steady, insistent, like fists on a door. Used to be a rest area out here, Cricket said after a moment. Before you started, most likely. Little concrete pull-off with some picnic tables. Folks used it when storms blew through, and the interstate shut down. Nate tried to picture it. This stretch was bare to him, just wide shoulders and the occasional ranch road. One winter, Cricket went on, his voice taking on a rhythm like someone telling a story they'd told before. Storm came in faster than they thought. Ice. Trucks backed up for miles. Some drivers slept in the lot, some in their cabs. One didn't want to shut his rig down, just sat at the rest area on idle. Trailer tight, full of folks he wasn't supposed to be hauling anyway. Figured he'd run when the plows came. The knocks beat on. Nate's throat felt dry. What happened? He asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Power lines went down, Cricket said. Whole strip went dark. Temperature dropped. Plows didn't reach that stretch till morning. He didn't describe what they found. He didn't have to. The quiet between his sentences did enough. They tore that rest area out after, he added. Didn't want the reminder sitting on the side of the road. But just because you scrape concrete away doesn't mean you take everything with it. Nate stared at the white lines ahead, at the faint gleam of guardrail beyond them. His palms were slick on the steering wheel. You saying what I think you're saying? He asked. I'm saying you're hauling an empty box past a place where a whole lot of people once wanted out, Cricket said. Sometimes empties are like a low spot in the air. Sounds roll into them. Feelings too. Nate swallowed hard. On the dash, his air pressure gauges sat steady. Engine temp normal. No vibration through the wheel that shouldn't be there. The knocks went on. You already checked the seal, Cricket reminded him quietly. You know there's nothing you can do for anybody who isn't in this cab with you right now. You stop in that stretch, you're just giving them somewhere closer to knock. Cold prickled along Nate's spine. He tightened his grip on the wheel and kept rolling. The river appeared at last, a barely seen band of darker dark beyond the guardrail. The highway rose onto the bridge. For a moment, the knocking changed, echoing in a way that made his bones hum. Then, halfway across, it stopped. Not faded, not slowed. Just cut off, as if someone had dropped a switch. The sudden quiet was almost worse. He realized, with a jolt, that his shoulders had been hunched around his ears. He made himself breathe. Long and slow. On the far side of the river, the flat land resumed its slow, endless stretch. The sky in the east carried the faintest hint of gray, where dawn would eventually smear in. The CB was silent. "Cricket?" Nate said. "You still there?" Static answered him. Whatever pocket of signal they'd shared seemed to have folded up and slipped away. At mile 205, he saw the glow of a truck stop ahead, its tall sign a familiar logo. He didn't realize he'd been craving other lights, other people, until his chest eased at the sight. He pulled in, found a slot between two reefers, and set the brake. For a second, he sat motionless, waiting. Nothing. No knocks. No strange vibration. He climbed down, the lot's sodium lights casting everything in a flat orange wash. Diesel engines rumbled here and there. The smell of fuel and fried food hung in the air. He forced himself to walk back to the trailer. The seal still shone unbroken. The metal skin of the box bore the usual scratches, a shallow dent here and there. He put his palm flat against the door. The cold pressed back, solid, still. "Just physics," he whispered. "Just sound." Inside the truck stop, the TV over the counter played news on low volume. Nate paid for coffee, half watching as a graphic about winter storm preparedness slid past and was replaced by a segment he barely caught. 20 years since the tragedy at the now-removed Riverside Rest Area, the anchor was saying. On the screen, for a heartbeat, an old photo appeared. A concrete pull-off, a few picnic tables, a single light pole. A white trailer loomed in the background, emergency vehicles clustered around it. The image was grainy, distant. The caption beneath it read, "Remembering those lost." Nate's hand tightened around his coffee cup. Back in the lot, he climbed into his cab and shut the door, feeling the familiar barrier settle between him and the rest of the world. He sat there for a while, engine off, the ticking of cooling metal loud in the enclosed space. Eventually, he broke the seal. Company rules said not to, but he needed to see. He swung the doors wide. Empty boards, dust, the stack of broken pallets at the far end, the faint smell of wood and old cardboard. On the inside of the right-hand door, near the latch, a patch of dust looked disturbed. 4 faint, clean ovals the size of fingertips, and below them, the blur of what might have been a palm, pressed and dragged downward at a slight angle. He could tell himself it was from the last dockhand who'd closed up without gloves. The marks could have been weeks old, months, but when he laid his own hand over them, palm to steel, the spaces didn't quite line up. He stepped back, heart beating a little too fast, and closed the doors. The latch clicked home, with a sound that felt final. At the depot hours later, under the bright, ordinary fluorescence of the yard, a mechanic gave his trailer a routine once-over and found nothing wrong. No loose panels, no broken crossmembers, nothing that would bang in the night. "You sure you heard something?" the man asked, half grinning, wiping his hands on a rag. "Empty trailers make noise," Nate said. "You know how it is." He didn't mention the knocks, or the way they'd stopped the second he'd cleared the river, or the voice on the CB that had known when to tell him to keep going. On his next assignment sheet, under trailer request, there was a blank space where drivers could write preferences if they had them. Most people left it empty. Nate picked up his pen. In small letters, not quite sure why he was even bothering. He wrote, "Not 3,000. 127, if possible." He never did see Cricket in person, not that he knew. But every time he drove that stretch at night with an empty box behind him, he found himself turning the CB up just a notch around mile 190, listening for a familiar, rough-edged voice. And if the trailer behind him shifted and creaked like a restless sleeper, or if a random rattle sounded too much like knuckles on a door, he did the only thing he could. He kept his hands on the wheel, his eyes on the road ahead, and he did not stop to open a door he could no longer do anything to help. Story number 7. On clear nights, the stretch of I-80 through southern Wyoming could feel like driving along the edge of the world. The land rolled away in dark waves on both sides of the interstate, barren and vast, broken only by low ridges and the occasional string of lights from a distant town. Windmills turned slowly on the horizon by day, their silhouettes black against bruise-colored sunsets. By night, their red warning beacons blinked in slow, patient rhythm. Jace had been running that route long enough to know its moods. Summer meant heat mirages and long, dry hours. Winter meant wind relentless, sharp and sudden storms that could turn the road from bare asphalt to whiteout in minutes. Tonight was early winter. The first snow had dusted the plains earlier in the week, thin patches of white clinging in low spots. The sky above his windshield was clear and hard, stars wheeling in icy arcs. The wind was up, but not howling yet. It pushed at the side of the trailer in, occasional gusts, nudging him just enough to remind him what it might become later. He checked the outside temp sensor. 19 degrees Fahrenheit and dropping. The dash clock read 12:41 a.m. The CB had gone mostly quiet as he left the last cluster of truck stops behind. Every once in a while, a voice crackled in with talk of scale houses and speed traps hundreds of miles away. Out here, in these hours, most drivers were just heads down, hands steady, pushing through. Jace flicked through the radio stations with one finger, more out of habit than need. The usual country and classic rock frequencies faded in and out, eaten by static. He rolled through a talk station where someone was arguing about cattle prices, then a late-night evangelist, then nothing but hiss. He was about to turn the radio off when a clean signal snapped into place, loud and clear. "You're on Highway 80 watch," a woman's voice said, smooth and practiced. "Time is 1:14 a.m. Current temp at the Arlington marker is 19 degrees. Winds at 25 out of the west, gusting to 35. High wind advisories remain in effect for light and high-profile vehicles from Elk Mountain to Laramie." Jace's hand froze halfway to the power knob. There was no delay in the sound, no fading, no crackle. It was as clear as if the station were broadcasting from a tower a mile down the road. He glanced at the clock again. 12:42 a.m. The woman's voice continued, rattling off mile markers and localized conditions in detail he'd never heard on any station before. Blowing snow reported east of Walcott Junction, visibility reduced to less than a quarter mile in spots. "Watch for black ice on bridge decks. We have reports of a stranded tractor trailer at mile 239, eastbound, partially blocking the right lane. No injuries reported." Repeat, "No injuries reported." Jace slowed a fraction, more in thought than out of need. He was westbound, empty to Salt Lake. That put the stranded rig on the other side of the road. He scanned across the median out of pure instinct as the green sign for mile 239 flashed by. Sure enough, a pair of hazard lights blinked in the dark, flanked by the faint outline of a truck nosed onto the shoulder in the eastbound lane. A highway patrol cruiser sat behind it, blue lights rotating silently in the distance. The timing was perfect. Too perfect. He listened hard. "Highway cameras currently show normal traffic flow in both directions," the radio voice said calmly. "Remember to take breaks as needed and avoid unnecessary lane changes in crosswinds." Up next, we'll take a look at conditions near the Bitter Creek overpass. Jace's hands tightened for half a second, just hearing the name. Bitter Creek. He didn't like that stretch. Not since last winter, when he'd hit black ice just past the overpass, felt the trailer start to walk out from behind him. He'd caught it barely hands and feet working on instinct, eyes locked on the hood as the whole rig slid a few feet sideways before biting back into the pavement. He'd thought about it on every run since. The radio's backlight glowed softly in the dark dash. He'd never heard of a station called Highway 80 Watch. Not on any previous run. It wasn't on his usual preset list. The numbers on the dial read 1060 AM, a slot usually occupied by farm reports in the daytime. He told himself it was a new local service, maybe some kind of pilot program backed by the state DOT. A late-night traffic channel just for this corridor. Still, when the woman on the radio said, "We'll be right back after this short message," and a familiar jingle for a truck stop miles behind him played, something uneasy stirred under his ribs. The ad ended. The announcer came back. "And we're staying with you through the dark hours on Highway 80 watch," she said, voice still even. "It's 1:17 a.m. on this cold November night. If you're just joining us, here's what you need to know up ahead." Jace looked at his dash clock. 12:45 a.m. He watched the minutes tick. On 12:47 a.m., the voice on the radio said, "It's 1:19, and moved on. The difference stayed the same, about half an hour, always ahead. His scalp prickled. He drove. The interstate unspooled under his headlights in familiar patterns. Snow fences stood dark on the hillsides like lines of teeth. The occasional cluster of reflector posts slid by. Wind worried at the trailer, stronger now. On the radio, the woman's voice described conditions at points he hadn't reached yet. Slick spots reported near mile 255 westbound right lane. Drivers are advised to merge left in advance. He kept an ear on her as he rolled. 10 miles later, his beams picked out skid marks in the right lane just where she'd said, fresh dark lines against the paler pavement. He moved left well before them. State troopers are responding to a multi-vehicle slide-off near the Quealy Dome exit eastbound, left lane blocked. He glanced across as he passed that marker later. A wrecker's lights flashed faintly in the far distance. Silhouettes gathered around a jackknifed rig. Each time, the radio described it first. Then, 20 to 30 minutes later, he saw it with his own eyes. He told himself it was some ultra-local station with access to DOT cameras and scanners running just ahead of him in time. He told himself the only oddity was the clock difference. Then, somewhere west of Rock Springs, the reports changed. He'd just passed a glowing blue sign promising fuel and food at the next exit. His coffee had cooled to an unappealing lukewarm. He was thinking about whether to stop when the announcer's bright tone softened, just a little. "Time is 1:42 a.m., she said. "We have a special note now for commercial drivers between Rock Springs and Green River." Jace glanced at his clock. 1:10 a.m. 5 years ago tonight, the woman continued, a multi-vehicle crash near the Bitter Creek overpass claimed the life of a truck driver named Jace Morrow. His name sat in the air like someone had dropped a stone into still water. He almost took his hands off the wheel. Investigators later determined that excessive speed for the conditions and disregard of closures contributed to the tragedy. The announcer's voice went on, still calm, still perfectly paced. High wind advisories and flashing closure signs were in place at the time, but several vehicles, including Morrow's blue Cascadia, continued westbound. He tuned her out for a second, heartbeat suddenly loud inside his chest. Jace's rig was a blue Cascadia. His last name was Morrow. Up ahead, the green sign for Bitter Creek's exit number loomed, its reflective surface catching his headlights. Bitter Creek Road, exit 142. His throat went dry. He snapped the radio off, the silence slamming into the cab like a physical thing. The dim, ordinary hiss of the road rushed in to fill it. His first instinct was simple and fierce. This was a coincidence. The name wasn't so rare. Lots of companies ran blue Cascadias. The described crash might have happened. This was a dangerous road, but it wasn't about him. It couldn't be. He drove another mile in total quiet. Then that silence began to feel worse than the voice. He jabbed the button and brought the radio back. 2 passenger vehicles and 1 additional tractor trailer were involved, the announcer was saying. 9 people were injured. The highway was closed for 14 hours for investigation and cleanup. State Patrol reminds all drivers tonight, especially our Jaces out there, that closures are issued for a reason. A low instrumental bed of music began to play under her words, something somber and generic, the kind used in local news segments about memorials. Jace licked his dry lips. "You in the blue Freightliner near exit 142, the woman's voice said then, so suddenly direct that it made his skin jump. "If you're hearing this, we'd like you to listen carefully." His hand hovered over the radio power knob again. He didn't press it. "High wind restrictions are expected to go into effect near Bitter Creek in 18 minutes, she said. "Electronic signs will begin flashing in 12. At least 3 trucks will ignore them tonight and attempt to cross before the full closure. 1 will not make it." He glanced out his windshield. The overhead message board a mile ahead was still dark. "Slow to 45, the voice said quietly. "Move to the right lane. Take the next turnout and wait 20 minutes. Then continue at reduced speed." Anger flared up, sharp and bright, cutting across the unease. It was one thing to hear about other people's wrecks. It was another to be singled out by name, told what to do by some disembodied stranger on a station he'd never heard of. His company's ETA expectations fluttered in his mind. He could already see the storm warnings in the forecast. The schedule was tight, but not impossible. Stopping would push him back. He hadn't seen any closure signs yet. The wind was stiff, sure, but he'd driven worse. He set his jaw. "I don't take orders from a ghost station," he said into the empty cab, voice sounding too loud. The radio hummed softly. The woman's tone didn't change. "This program is supported by listeners like you," she said. "People who wish someone had warned them in time." A small, treacherous thought slid in under his anger. What if this was him? Not metaphorically. Literally. A version that didn't slow. A version that plowed straight into whatever lay ahead. A version whose wreck had spawned this very segment, years ago, in some other version of the world. He pushed the idea away. The overhead sign loomed. As his lights hit it, orange letters flickered to life. High wind advisory. Light and high-profile vehicles use caution. Not a closure, just a warning. The same wording that sometimes stood up all winter. He passed under it, feeling the wind shove at his trailer more insistently. The exit for a small turnout appeared on the right. A narrow paved apron with a sign, "Truck parking, 3-hour limit. Emergency use recommended during adverse weather." It was empty. Sodium lights cast a pale, lonely cone over the lot. Jace's blinker stayed off. "Time is 1:47 a.m., the voice on the radio said. "In 13 minutes, a white Volvo hauling an empty box will attempt to pass on the left of a slow-moving rig just shy of Bitter Creek, ignoring gust advisories. 6 minutes after that, your truck will reach the same spot." He swallowed. A new sign ahead flashed to life in the dark. "Crosswinds exceed 60 miles per hour. High-profile vehicles advised to stop. Next turnout, 1 mile." The rig shifted under him, a long, slow lean as the wind hit it broadside on an exposed rise. His fingers tightened on the wheel without conscious decision. He had been doing this long enough to know his limits. To feel the subtler ways in which a gust could grab and twist, especially when he was light. He ran a mental calculation of time lost if he pulled over. 20 minutes now, maybe more if conditions worsened. A late delivery, an annoyed dispatcher, a note in his file, at worst. In his mind's eye, unbidden, he saw a different picture. Blue and red lights strobed against snow. His own rig on its side, paint scuffed, logo visible from the helicopter shots that aired again and again on local TV. Something about the radio's matter-of-fact tone stuck with him. It didn't sound like a threat, or a dare, or a haunting. It sounded like a forecast. He flicked on his right blinker. The truck eased into the turnout lane, tires humming over the grooved asphalt. He rolled into the empty lot and stopped well back from the entrance, nose pointed toward the way out. He set the brake. The trailer rocked once, hard, as a fresh gust slammed into it, then settled. The radio carried on, unbothered by his change in course. And for those just tuning in, we're marking 5 years since the Bitter Creek pileup that changed nighttime traffic patterns on this stretch forever, the announcer said. We'll take a moment of silence for the lives impacted. The music bed faded. For 10 seconds, the only sounds in Jace's cab were the wind buffeting the box, the soft ticking of cooling plastic, and the steady thud of his own heartbeat. Then the woman spoke again. "It's 1:50, 2 a.m., she said. "If you're sitting in the turnout east of Bitter Creek, thank you for your patience. In 4 minutes, the white Volvo will cross the overpass in a high gust. In 5 minutes, State Patrol will begin setting hard closures eastbound and westbound. In 22 minutes, traffic will resume single lane with escorts." He stared at the dark ribbon of road beyond the lot's edge. Headlights appeared out there, twin points gliding east, then west. The wind rose in a long howl, slapping his side mirrors hard enough to make them tremble. An eastbound truck, white, from what he could tell in the sodium glare, rolled past, slower than freeway speed, hazards blinking. A few seconds later, a blast of wind hit hard enough to rock his cab, suspension creaking. He saw the trailer ahead of that truck sway, the whole rig leaning ominously toward the shoulder, then right itself, hazard lights bright in the gust-driven snow that had begun to swirl low near the ground. His breath came out in a foggy white puff. On the radio, the woman's tone lightened, as if a tense moment in a live broadcast had just passed. "Good job there," she said. Nice save. He had the absurd feeling she was talking directly to that other driver. Or to him. Or both. On his dash, the minutes crept. 1:02 a.m. when he'd pulled in. 1:10 a.m. 1:15 a.m. Out on the highway, faint lights bloomed as emergency vehicles made their way toward Bitter Creek. After a while, Jace saw the flash of red and blue through the dark. Far off, then nothing. The radio's reports slowly shifted. Closures are now in place, the announcer said. Troopers are escorting traffic one direction at a time past Bitter Creek. Expect delays of up to 40 minutes. No serious injuries reported at this time. A reminder. If you're parked and listening, keep your lights on, stay seat belted, and wait for conditions to improve. Jace let out a breath he hadn't noticed he was holding. He sat in the quiet cocoon of his cab and watched the clock. At 20 minutes, he put the truck back in gear. As he rolled out of the turnout and merged back onto the interstate, the wind felt a little less vicious, though it still pressed. The overhead sign now read, "Travel alert. Escort traffic ahead. Prepare to stop." He joined a slow line of vehicles creeping toward the overpass. The road surface bore fresh scars, long, shallow arcs of black where tires had skidded. A faint dusting of snow had appeared in the low dips. At Bitter Creek itself, a patrol car idled on the shoulder, lights spinning lazily. A tow truck sat farther up, chains clinking as a battered white Volvo was winched from the grassy slope near the guardrail. Its trailer leaned at an awkward angle, top corner crumpled. Another truck had stopped just beyond, flashers on, driver standing well back with his arms crossed, face unreadable in the intermittent light. Jace kept his eyes on his lane, shoulders tight. The escort truck ahead of him, an orange state pickup with an aero bar, led them past at a controlled crawl. Once they were clear, it pulled to the side to allow the waiting eastbound column their turn. When he finally rolled up the grade and away from the scene, his radio crackled. "Conditions improving near Bitter Creek," the announcer said, voice once more calm and generic. "Winds are still gusty, but closures are being lifted. Time is 2:19 a.m. He glanced at his dashboard. 1:47 a.m. Half an hour different, always ahead. He kept listening for a while longer. The station continued to give precise, almost uncanny updates about road conditions. Small incidents he later confirmed with his own eyes. Lane closures that lifted or shifted by the time he reached them. Then, somewhere west of Rollins, the signal began to break. Words stuttered into static. Sentences cut off mid-measure. Another twist of the tuning knob in either direction found nothing but distant stations talking about markets or midnight music. And that's Highway 80. "Watch. Here with you through the dark," the woman's voice said one last time, then dissolved into white noise. Jace drove on. At the next major truck stop, he parked, tiredness hitting him all at once now that the worst of the road was behind him. Inside the bright, humming building, a bulletin board near the restrooms held flyers for local services and notices from the state DOT. One flyer caught his eye. "Highway 80 Watch. Coming soon," it said in bold letters above a logo. A diagram below showed how to tune to a designated AM frequency to hear up-to-date traffic alerts and weather for the corridor. At the bottom, in smaller print, someone had scribbled a note in pen. "Pilot program postponed. Funding delayed. No dates, no details." The flyer looked like it had been there for a while. The corners were dog-eared and a little yellowed. Jace stared at it for a long moment. He took his phone out and tried searching for the station on the web. The only hits were old press releases about planned improvements to traveler information services, years out of date. No active feed. No recent mentions. Back in his cab, with the truck shut down and the heater ticking softly, he sat in the dark and thumbed the radio dial to 1060 AM. Hiss met him. A faint, ghostly signal from a station 3 states away bled through something about basketball scores, nothing more. He rested his head against the seat and closed his eyes. Later, when he filled out his log and trip notes, there was a line where drivers could mark any unusual events or road hazards encountered. Most left it blank. Some added mundane things. "Deer near mile 212. Ice on ramp at exit 317. In neat block letters, Jace wrote, "Highway Advisory Station gave accurate early warnings. Bitter Creek closure avoided. Program seems ahead." He hesitated, then added one more quiet sentence in the margin, barely more than a whisper in ink. Listen this time. On future trips, especially on nights when the wind started to build and the feel of the wheel turned light under his hands, he found himself scanning the AM band again as he approached the lonely heart of Wyoming. Sometimes, all he heard was static. Sometimes, a different station filled the cab. But once, months later on another cold, clear midnight, just as the overhead sign for Bitter Creek came into view, a familiar, calm voice slipped through the noise. Time is 1:13 a.m., it said, faint but unmistakable. If you're out here with us tonight, keep it slow through the gusts. Some stories only have to happen once. He turned the volume up, eyes on the road, and let the strange, impossible,